Mysteries of Egypt, Part 1, with Ben from Uncharted X. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And we are back from Egypt, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast. And we are doing a swapcast with Ben, the Dread Ben Kirkwick, from the excellent...
Our fearless leader.
Our fearless leader from the excellent Uncharted X channel. And we are once again nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed here on the Edwards Plateau. And yeah, what an amazing trip. And we do plan on continuing the Path of the Pole book report, but of course we're going to be pumping out some Egypt episodes since we just got back from there. And this first one, we wanted Ben to join us. We're going to do a recap, I think, and discuss maybe some of the things we learned. Ben, thank you so much for joining us, buddy.
Guys, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, particularly after these trips. This was such an epic trip. Yeah, it's good to actually do a recap and try and run through all the things that we saw and the people we talked to and the discoveries that were made and the mysteries that were solved.
Yes.
Were a couple.
Were there any mysteries solved?
I don't.
There was.
Were there? Yeah, there was a few, maybe.
There was some taste tests that happened, you know.
All right, so before we dive into the recap, though, we are joined by the Watcher. He is deep beneath his secret space station in secret outer space. Brett, buddy, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
Very excited to hear the tales of the Giza Plateau and the rest of Egypt. Super, super stoked.
Yeah.
Last time you guys came back, I was able to pick up on a bunch of new thoughts and ways to look at things, and it was great. I'm looking forward to doing it all over again. Blow my mind.
Well, what we really need to do is get you out there with us one of these trips.
Yeah,
you
bro.
just need to show up, buddy. Just, do a crash landing in the in the desert, and we'll pick you up.
You're telling me you want me to crash in Egypt in a spaceship, and you think that that's not going to cause a riot?
The aliens
In a
have
good way.
returned. Well, it's just the Watcher. It's okay. It's all right. But yeah, we need to get you out there sometime. So we'll do that at some point. All right. I think the first thing I wanted to say is to the entire group that was out there with us, you guys were amazing. We had an absolutely fantastic group of people with us. And, Egypt is special. Absolutely. It's a very unique place, but to see it with all of you and the bonds that were formed and all the discussions we had on deck mixed with alcohol and music and rock and roll. I mean, there's just nothing better. Also pool. There was a lot of games of pool played.
I destroyed all of them. No, not really. I got my ass kicked too many times.
And what about Ben? What about the beer order? The infamous beer order.
I have a great video of that.
Yeah, I forgot all about that. You just mentioned it. Yeah, it faded out. But yeah, that was the time.
Yeah, Mo
It's an
turned.
adventure in and of itself.
Yeah, Mo turned it over to Ben. He was just like, "I can't handle this. You do it." And then I go over there and I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to bed. Here's my suitcase for getting beer." And Ben looks up, sweating. He's got piles of cash on the table. He's trying to count what's going on. Man, it was an epic adventure.
Oh my God, that was one of my favorite parts. Getting
That
all
was
that
interesting.
booze.
Yeah.
They
It felt somehow illegal, even though it wasn't.
right.
I know.
It seemed illegal.
I was trying to be nonchalant, standing on the street with like 5 or 6 other people with a bunch of suitcases with some weird beat up Volkswagen, just like loading all this booze
Rolls
in there,
up.
just like nothing to see here, folks.
Right. Right. So if it isn't clear, Ben had to borrow 5 or 6 suitcases
Oh yeah.
in order to get all the beer from the place they bought it onto the boat.
Yeah. It's they do sell the booze on the boat, but it's much cheaper if you buy it from I think it's drinkies.net in Egypt.
Yeah.
Actually, you can. So there was some bulk orders placed, and it's like one guy in his car just had just rolled up with the back of it just loaded down with beer and wine and a few bottles of really gnarly Egyptian spirits. I'm sure some of it doubles as paint thinner, but I mean, when you're getting a bottle of gin for $3, I'm really not sure.
Oh,
it's going to be worth your time. You know?
yeah.
But
Hey, I drank some of that vodka. It was pretty good.
Yeah, oof.
Might have drank too much of that vodka, and it was pretty good.
There's a bit of that going around. It was good, yes. And I would echo your sentiment about thank you to everybody that was on the trip. It was, yeah, I every trip's been fantastic, but this in particular, this group, I guess, and it partially because this was the, the contact at the cabins. We had the Darren and Graham from Grimerica there as well. We'd kind of been planning this trip for a couple of years, and so there were a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people that had been to the Scabland, trips, and everybody was kind of fired up and just energized. Everybody got together. I mean, I'm even including the back of the green bus crew in that. It was a great time and made better by the company. And it was, even though it was a large group, I think it worked out really well. I couldn't have been happier with it. So.
Yep. I also want to say what's up to all of my friends, my very close friends there in the group. Pretty much everybody. Just had so much fun with all of you, and I miss all of you.
Yeah.
And damn, I hope we get to do it again.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So on to the mysteries.
Yeah.
So we got, first thing, we got into a couple of places we hadn't been in before. At least I hadn't. And I know one of them, Ben, hadn't been in there either. Yusuf hadn't even been in there.
No, and even like, was it Dr. Hassanin and this guy's like 50, 60-year-old Egyptologist traveling with us that hadn't, nobody had been in this one place. I was really, really excited to get in there, and we sprung it on the group as a surprise. I like to, if we can organize kind of surprise special permissions and little things that aren't on the itinerary, we try and do it. And, a couple, I think it was at last year, we surprised people with the step pyramid, going beneath the step pyramid.
That's right.
Which is a huge deal. Like, if you guys have seen the videos on that, the stuff that's amazing. We'll talk more about that because we went down there again on this trip. But and on this trip, we actually pulled off a couple of special sort of surprise permissions. But the big one for me that I'd been kind of working with Yusuf and Mo for, more than a year. Oh, did I just drop out?
No.
Okay. Something's going on my computer here. It's fine. It was the Sphinx Temple.
Yes.
So this is, if people don't know, the Sphinx Temple, it's like if you imagine looking at the Sphinx, you're looking at it, you've got the pyramids in the background, you've got kind of the Valley Temple. It's that massive granite structure that, the granite casing stones over the limestone structure. And just to the right of that, there's another similar structure that's been closed forever. Like, it's literally, you go and look at it and the gates are welded shut, and you can kind of peer in there and have a little look in there. It's quite a mysterious area of the Giza Plateau. And as far as I know, very, very few people have ever gotten in there. Certainly it's never been a special permission that's been offered. As you said, Yusuf's lived there his whole life, never been in there.
Right.
These guys that work in the, tourism industry, the Egyptologists, had never been in there. Muhammad Hassan, our hieroglyphic expert, had never been in there. So it was a real treat for everyone, and we got to go in there and explore it, and it was pretty mind blowing. Yeah, that was a really cool place. So something I'd been wanting to do forever, and we filmed the hell out of it, and there will be content.
Yes. Yeah, and it was such a strange place.
It is.
It was, I don't know, to me, walking around in there, it was, and this might be in part because no one has been in there for so long. What has it been closed since the 60s? Something like that, closed to the public since?
I don't know specifically. I mean, for me, when I was researching it, the best resource I had was like Robert Temple. The photos I saw of it, and particularly the one, that drain, that U-shaped block that's in there, the granite block.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've seen black and white photos of that, and it was in his book. Now, I'm sure he took them in color, but he reproduced them in his book in black and white, and he has a lecture where he talks about it. I haven't read his book. I'm sure he talks more about it. I know what his theory is for what that particular thing was, but I hadn't seen like color photos, or certainly no video that you can find inside the Sphinx Temple. So it was really cool getting in there. It has a lot of really interesting features. I really need to study the footage that you get in there. You kind of go into these new spaces, and it's great because I think this is the experience everybody has when they first go to Egypt for the first time. It's certainly what people tell me, is that it's kind of all overwhelming. When you go to the Giza for the first time, you look at the pyramids or something for the first time, there's so many things jumping out at you, and everything's new and interesting, and there's too many details to kind of take in at once. So that's absolutely how I felt in the in that Sphinx temple. And it's really interesting also because in between, like, kind of, there's a little alleyway almost between the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple, and they'd moved in a bunch of these granite cornice blocks, you know, these curved shapes. There's only a couple of them out the front, but they had a whole stack of them. There's a row of like 10 or 15 of these things shoved up in that area. So, you know, getting to see more examples of that type of stonework was really cool. And then just the structure itself is kind of super mysterious, and its connection to the Sphinx and the legends of the Sphinx and what is written about the Sphinx on the, you know, the dream stelae that's between its paws is really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, Yusuf and Muhammad were talking about, you know, there's an interpretation for it where it may be. So they show the Sphinx on a pedestal.
On a pedestal, yeah.
Right. And Yusuf thinks that they may be referring to because you kind of look at it from the front, it's almost as if the Sphinx could be sitting on top of or above the Sphinx temple. So he thinks they could be representing the Sphinx temple as the pedestal, and the pedestal is supposedly the gateway,
right?
That the Sphinx is guarding. So, you know, this could be the gateway to the tombs of the gods and all the rest of it. And I have the story recorded from him talking about it. It's an interesting interpretation, and for sure there's stuff that seems to go into the ground there. That's the other thing. Like there was
a pipe going into the ground, or there's a hole drilled into the ground in the middle of the temple, where, like, if you're standing at the hole in the middle and you look, it's like right there at the facing the Sphinx, where the Sphinx is looking right at you. And it's kind of in line with the other hole outside that has the metal pipe coming out of it.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying when I was showing this on stream yesterday briefly too. That's exactly right. So there is, and I talk about it in one of my videos, but, you know, Zahi Hawass himself in one of his books talks, and you can go to Giza and you stand out the front of that whole area of the Valley Temple, like the cleared off dirt area, which they say was a harbor in ancient times. You know, there's like a concrete block with this, you know, 8-inch metal pipe sticking up out of it. Yeah. And it just looks like, what the hell is this? But it's the remnants from where he drilled. Was himself, they organized a drill, and they went down, I think it was between 100 and 150 feet, somewhere around there, and they hit granite. And that's where it stopped. So, you know, the Giza Plateau being a limestone outcrop, there's no natural granite. So, you know, what's granite doing 100 plus feet down into the ground? Well, it's probably been put there. And I think he even mentions that it was like machined granite, like it was a worked surface. They pulled up chips from what seemed to be a work surface. So certainly indicative that there's something else beneath the ground there. And we don't know, though.
Right. And so it was interesting that there was another drill hole inside the Sphinx temple. Like they had drilled there as well. For stuff. And it's you know, like there's all kinds of, first of all, walking around in there versus walking. So the other part of that special permission was that we got to go down into the Sphinx enclosure, which is a special permission at this point. Like most people who come to the plateau, you can kind of go up and you can walk along above the Sphinx enclosure and look down on it, but you can't go down in there. So we had a special permission for this tour that allowed us down into the enclosure, and alongside that, we got to get into the Sphinx temple. So both of those things were happening at the same time. And it was interesting because going back and forth, the three of Ben, you and I, we went into the Sphinx enclosure, then we came back out and went into the Sphinx temple, and then back out again and back into the Sphinx enclosure while everybody else went in there because we were, you know, shuffling people through. And this was the thing that struck me, you know, just overall, was that being in the Sphinx enclosure, while you're obviously next to a very ancient artifact, something that may be very ancient, we don't know how old it is, there's so much repair, and you can see, you know, all these different, like from modern Roman, you know, all the way to dynastic stuff, and you have to look way up high to see the actual parts of the original structure, and even that, it looked like somebody had been putting plaster on it to protect it, because you could see finger marks, like they had been plastering around the Sphinx up there. So really walking around, the only original parts of that entire thing are the enclosure walls themselves. And even those have some repairs. So it was strange being in there, and there's all of this layering, more and more modern. And then you go into the Sphinx temple and it's completely different. It's I don't know, it was very strange. Like the whole thing felt very ancient, but it also felt almost completely gone. Like most of what used to be there was totally gone. There weren't even any floor tiles left. Like a lot of these structures have big floor tiles, beautiful, sometimes calcite, whatever. They've tiled the floor in there, and sometimes that stuff is still there. But in this case, it was down to the bedrock. And there are these big holes and pits next to these big, what looked like standing stones. And I don't know, it was just it was like standing beneath the foundation of the structure itself. And all that's left is a little bit of the walls and some other strange bits and pieces scattered around inside the thing.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like you say, taken down to the bedrock. And we saw in there, one of the things that you notice, you see that same combination of stones that you find on Old Kingdom structures. It's limestone, granite, white calcite or alabaster.
Yeah.
The crystalline substance. And then you see basalt as well. I'm not sure we saw basalt in there, but in the Valley Temple, you have that white calcite floors, and then there's big blocks of it inside the little alcoves when you walk up to the Sphinx. But in the Sphinx Temple, there was chunks of white calcite laying around, and then one giant block of it,
like huge one, massive,
huge, like not a floor tile, like it was, 3 feet high and
whatever it was, it would have been a substantial,
that's right, big chunk of it, and it was laying around and heavily eroded, and that was the other thing. I was looking at my footage of it yesterday, and the other feature, you talk about holes going into the ground. So there's this one particular thing that I knew was in there that I really wanted to see, which is so there's a granite channeled block that's in there.
That's
and
right.
This is Robert Temple talks about this, and it's inset in the ground. It's even below the level of where the bedrock is. So it would have been below any floor tiles, which is what we see with these I'm fascinated by these U-shaped blocks. It's like a long block with this channel that's cut into it. And it's a U-shaped sort of channel, and you could imagine that it might have held a pipe or of copper or something like that, or people have theorized that they're for all sorts of different things that, mainstream kind of looks at them as like sewer drains or septic sewer systems. Other people think they're for water or some other thing. I really get the sense that it's something more, perhaps more industrial than that.
Yeah.
Because we see these on these Old Kingdom sites. You don't really see them anywhere else, and they're beneath the floor level. So, we see them at Giza. There's at least 3 blocks. There's that one in the Sphinx Temple. I'll talk about it a bit more in a sec, but there's another block of it hanging out the back of the Valley Temple, which is
that's right. Yeah,
actually way up high.
Yeah,
it's up high. It's really well shaped, and there's a big quartzite block above it, which is that other type of stone you see sometimes. Then you have another block of it up at the other end of the causeway, made of granite, that seems to run into that alabaster block that's in the mortuary temple area of the middle pyramid. And then, we see the same thing at Saqqara, some of them made from alabaster, some of them made from granite. There's just a couple fragments of them left out at Dashur lying around. You can see what may have been that infrastructure there as well, obviously evidence for it. And then Abu Sir and Abu Ghurab have it. And Abu Sir has probably the best preserved channel block infrastructure. It's all beneath the floor there. It's, there's Y pipes in it. It runs in all sorts of different directions. It runs beneath the entire causeway, and you can go right down to the end of the causeway where there's all this bush and stuff grown up, and over it you can still find more of these blocks there. So it's something we see on Old Kingdom sites, and it's beneath these floor levels, and it runs under the causeways, but it doesn't seem to exist in later sites. So to me, it's this fascinating aspect of them that hints at some sort of functional purpose. Now, in the Sphinx Temple, this one block is really interesting because it's a huge granite piece, and it's kind of the little U-shaped portion of it is inset into the block. And so in that inset part of it, they've jammed in other granite blocks. It's kind of like it's capped on top.
It's capped
with these other pieces of granite. So there's a channel running underneath it. And a couple of observations. So when Robert Temple looked at it, it actually runs into the ground. So there's a hole in the ground in front of it, and it's filled up with mud and debris now. We don't know how deep that goes. He thinks that hole was, the photos I've seen of it, that hole was deeper or more excavated. I think over time with the occasional bits of rain and stuff and sand that gets in there, that hole has been filling up.
Sure.
But it's clearly a hole going down into the ground. In fact, Temple thought that these things were used as rope guides to lower boxes and other things into the ground. So it could be an indicator of something, even if it was for that, which I doubt. I doubt it. Yeah. But it is an indicator that there's something going down into the ground there. And the other thing I noticed looking at the footage was that the granite of that block itself is incredibly decomposed. Like it's one of those melted, like falling apart granite. And we saw a couple other examples of that in a couple of different places. And what's, this is, we had a small brain geologist with us on the trip. Chuck, just kidding, Chuck. Actually, a very good geologist, practicing geologist, professional geologist with us. And we saw some other examples of this type of just super eroded granite to the point where it's falling apart when you in your hand, like breaking down into its constituent pieces, just super eroded. And these are worked pieces of stone. So this erosion and this deterioration of the granites happened after the surfaces were worked. And there's a couple examples we found at Karnak of this, and we were looking at it. And he Chuck essentially got to the point of saying, like, this wouldn't happen within 10,000 years. So he was, which seems also conservative, but still 10,000 years is way beyond the timeframes the standard model talks about. And it could potentially be quite longer. But I saw the same thing on that block in the Sphinx Temple. It just was chunks of it falling apart.
And just to make it clear, these pieces that Ben's talking about at Karnak are so decomposing that they look like mud brick when you first look at them. They look like piles of mud. You can't even identify them as granite at first. You have to really look closely, and you're like, oh my God, that's actually granite. It's
granite.
It looks like it's just completely falling apart.
Yeah, and we saw that something similar in the mountains near the Red Sea.
That's right.
These granite outcrops that have been exposed for who knows how long, but they're falling apart
in the same way.
And the sand, what looks like desert sand around them is actually the decomposed granite.
Yes.
And it's been piling up in sedimentary layers around the granite outcrops.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean it looked just like the stuff at Karnak.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It looks melted. So that's one of the things. It's like, people were thinking like maybe there was some process that was heating these things up and causing that. Well, did it also heat up all the mountains because they look like that?
Yes, that's right.
Or is it just really freaking old?
Yeah, I mean, those mountains are clearly the result of either age or potentially even taking like some sort of heat source, like a sun, a plasma event, who knows what. But it's really interesting granite there. Yeah, and I mean, I posted pictures of that, I remember, and there's some Twitter armchair experts absolutely convinced it's not granite. Like, this isn't granite. You don't know what you're talking about. Your geologist is full of shit. I'm like, were you there? Like, it's absolutely granite.
Definitely granite. It just doesn't
100% granite.
But it 100% doesn't look like granite, right? You can kind of understand.
Yeah, it does. It looks like granite that's completely destroyed.
Yeah, you get up close to it, and I have the film. It's like hard to convey in pictures, but it breaks apart. You see chunks of mica and quartz and hornblende and all those bits that make up granite, and you clean it off a bit. It's definitely granite.
Sure, it looks like granite up close when you get it and you sort of start inspecting it. But if you're kind of standing off, 20 or 30 feet, you think it's a pile of melting mud brick. That's what it looks like. Yeah. But it's not. Yeah.
I would like to point out too about this channel block and the idea that it's a sewer system.
Back to the Sphinx Temple.
It's really 3 channels. They cut one giant channel into the limestone bedrock.
Mm-hmm. It is.
To fit these blocks in that are 3 or 4 feet wide, 4 feet deep. I mean, it's just huge.
Yeah, they're huge. Yep.
And then long along this. So they cut this 4 foot wide, 4 foot deep trough into the limestone bedrock. Then they set a granite block in there that filled that trench. Then they cut like a foot wide and 8-inch deep trough into that granite. And then they cut a small 4-inch wide and maybe 3 or 4-inch deep trough in the middle of that.
In that trough, yeah.
Then they tiled over that small trough into the foot wide trough.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a ridiculous amount of work if you just need shit to flow downhill. Like, that is not what you do for a sewer system.
No.
So it's really speaks, like you said, to an industrial process, something that needed to be contained.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I mean, I would think of like even something that was maybe radioactive or something like that. Something that you really wanted to.
That's why
contain.
that granite's falling apart.
Potentially. Yeah.
It's radioactive damage.
Well, it's definitely it's either that or it's collected somehow, because remember at Abu Sia, that whole channel block infrastructure comes out into a quartzite bowl. You have a couple of quartzite blocks of it,
Yeah.
And, not for nothing, we hunted around
No,
and
that-
we found the entrance to that, like what seemed to be
Yeah.
the entrance to that system.
Yeah.
And it's pointing right at the pyramid. Like it's literally looks like it could have originally gone into the
Yes,
pyramid.
that's right.
Now there's the channel in the causeway is into limestone, so it seems, like
The blocks.
the channel blocks in the causeway at Abusir,
Yep, limestone.
it's limestone.
It's you get a mix. There's some of them are limestone, some of them are quartzite, but in the causeway they're mostly limestone. And underneath the floor of that courtyard, the Nusra courtyard is
The Watcher,
Yeah, Watcher.
It was flowing
It's
mercury, of
bro.
course.
Of course, it's flowing
flowing
mercury.
mercury. Of course, it's flowing mercury. Yeah,
Yes, that's what it is.
I see it. Yeah, I see the
Mystery solved.
Radioactive mercury. That's what it was, folks.
Yeah, I mean it runs. It does run into it's they're Y shaped too. Like it goes everywhere, and it's
Yeah,
all limestone
yeah.
underneath that courtyard, and it's just a real mystery. I don't know.
And there
It's
was
definitely. I definitely don't think it's a septic system.
No. Well, this is the thing. And so we're going to get Chuck on, the small brain geologist. We're going to have him on the show, and probably Marty to talk
he's
about
a
this
freaking
too.
back of the busser.
Both of them.
He is.
But
My friends.
it was great. All around that site at Abu Sir, there were bits of really rough looking pottery. And Chuck said he was just like, these look like molds to me. What did he call them? Crucibles.
Yeah.
Crucibles.
The metal pours in. It's a one-time use, so you don't have to make it super awesome, and you just break it when the metal cools and get the stuff out of there. So there's this shattered pottery, thick, rough stuff all over the place. And then Chuck actually took a piece of it and went over and spoke to someone there on the site.
Hassanin.
Was it Hassanin?
Or-
I thought he said he was trying to talk to one of the people at the site.
Oh,
and he just came back and said, yeah, they said that their idea now is that they were doing some kind of metallurgy there. So that's that may not be in the mainstream yet, but Chuck talked to some people there, and they said yes, it looks like metallurgy to them too.
Well, yeah,
some of that
Yusuf thinks also that those quartzite bowls at Abu Ghurab with those tubes
yes.
coming, the holes cut in, and may have been connected up.
Yep.
Because there's evidence that they had copper lining, like there may have been copper pipes in them, and may have been plated in copper on the inside. So, maybe these channels held copper pipes or something like that.
Yeah.
originally.
I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those mysteries. It's just like kind of gets dismissed as like, well, it's a septic system, sewer system.
Yeah, because the
For all the people living at the temple.
the mummy
apparently.
had to take a dump,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? It's a
God damn
septic
it.
system for the tomb.
Yeah. We
Folks.
need to make these.
It's
we
definitely
need to
a
make these
mystery
out of
solved.
granite and quartzite. Because
Yeah.
at Saqqara, they're made out of quartzite and granite as well. Like there's some, and the ones at Saqqara, remember we brushed off the side of them, and they're like amazingly well machined, like these crazy
Yeah.
flat surfaces and those straight cuts. So it seems to be built with quote unquote pyramid builder tech.
Yep.
Some
Soul-
of these blocks. So
Soul dumps.
I sold
See,
them.
when you got to go take a kef. Are you taking a kef or a ka? Just a kef this time.
You go number 2. You always go number 1.
What time we got? Where are we at?
I don't know.
Okay.
Almost there.
We're getting close.
So
Yeah.
I want to stress again that the pyramid complex is just. I mean, it stands out so much more clearly. Even like the second time, it's like people. I mean, you want to look at the pyramid and go inside and try to figure out, well, what is this thing all about? But there is so much going on the outside
Yeah.
of these
Yeah.
things that seems to be connected to what's going on the inside in some way. And everywhere you go where there's a pyramid, there is a bunch of this weird stuff on the outside. And of course, a lot of it had been quarried away and taken away, but there are traces of these systems around the outside that just don't make sense for the traditional, this is a burial site idea.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and it adds to the overall building project too. Like I have these really nice pictures I saw of where we parked the bus and we were looking at the the middle pyramid from that corner, and it's like the low corner. I think it's the east northeast corner, and just the layers of bedrock that they had to construct to create the foundation platform for that pyramid.
Yeah.
You remember
my
we
God,
parked
yeah.
the bus there,
Just
and
massive,
we all went,
massive blocks just stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's this huge foundation that they had to
Yes.
make first. It's like, it's 10 feet tall, and in that corner, and they had to level that all up before they even start building the pyramid. And then you got the pyramid, you've got the causeway, you've got the mortuary temple, you've got the valley temple. Yeah, all this infrastructure. It's just an astonishing amount. And all of this plays back, this is the question we keep coming back to when we look at these sites. I know on the site, it's the question about the erosion. The Sphinx plays into this, but not just the Sphinx, but the tremendous erosion that you see on structures like what they'd call the mortuary temple or pyramid temple up at the end of the causeway in front of the middle pyramid. These and giant limestone blocks. I mean, I think we were with you guys last year, and we found the biggest one that we found was like 380 tons or something crazy.
Yeah.
That huge block that's part of that mortuary temple structure, and just the erosion is severe. And I was making this point recently too, and it's one I'm going to keep coming back to, is because this is supposedly Old Kingdom. So say it's all Fourth Dynasty. We also have a ton of other Old Kingdom masonry work, like the small blocks, there's tombs and structures all around the causeway, both sides of it. The tombs of the nobles and all the high priest and everybody else that's associated with the dynasty, made in the same time, supposedly by the same people, and none of that shows the same type of erosion.
That's
It's
right.
these small limestone blocks, and it's still standing. It's not like they weren't earthquake proof or something, but you just don't see the same degree of erosion on that work that supposedly comes from the same time period that you do from this stuff that's sitting there, and it's just literally blocks have fallen off from other blocks because erosion has affected the lower blocks so much that it's toppled over.
Yeah.
It's a real open question, I think, about the erosion. And of course, there's we could talk for days about the erosion on the Sphinx. You mentioned it earlier, but
we can get into that, but let's take a quick break.
Yep.
We're up on
Roger that.
And
We'll be right back.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a jam session on the beach at the Red Sea with Ben, Russ, and Yusuf and myself. Yusuf and I drove, I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes total, probably, or more, to some marketplace far away, and went walking all around looking for a shop that sold musical instruments, and we finally found one. And the guy had this giant pile of flutes, which is what we were looking for. But they were like cheap knockoffs made, just like somebody that is not a musician, just drilling these flutes. And Youth is like picking them up, and he's going through them all. And he's like, no. He picks it up, holds it, looks at it, puts it down, picks the next one up. And I'm like, what are you looking for? And he's like, it must have 7 sections on the bamboo. It's not right. And so then eventually it came down to none of them were right. And so then he starts playing through everyone to see if any of them are tuned properly. And they were just not.
The guy just
And so
drilled random holes.
Yeah. So I go over there, grab a guitar off the guy's rack and like tune it up. And then I start, playing the scales with him along with the flute to see if and it's just like, nope, throw that one aside. Man, we were there for like 30 or 45 minutes while he went through all these flutes. And he eventually found this tiny little one that was like the best of all of them, and it was still terrible.
Yeah. He brings it back and like
complaining
soaks
the
it in
whole
oil.
time. Yeah. He goes to the fish restaurant, and he's like, I need some oil. They give him oil, soaks the thing in the oil, and then we jammed, and it was beautiful.
That was awesome.
And
It was.
yeah. It was just funny because it was like he said it was the most expensive flute he had ever bought because we had to pay for the taxi all the way over there. And the crappiest one he'd ever bought too. But it was totally worth it because we got to jam.
So this is telling me the call ends in 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, we didn't do the reset call.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course we forgot to do that.
Another pro move.
Yeah.
That's all right.
We're professionals.
We can fix the call right now with 0 edits. Bam. Done. All right. So are we gonna talk about the erosion on the Sphinx
Yes.
enclosure? This is also the first time we've ever been down into the Sphinx enclosure. We didn't go last year.
Right.
Ben, I'm sure you've been down there.
Yeah, I went there in 2015. I was looking forward to this as well because that was my first trip to Egypt when I went down in there, and I had learned a bit since then, so I was keen to get back.
First question: did you notice differences from your trip in 2015?
Yeah, I mean, I observed a lot more. I was honestly paying probably more attention to the Sphinx temple than the Sphinx itself, but I did take the chance to kind of walk all around it, and I think you mentioned it earlier. And that's that's why the argument about the erosion of that whole structure sort of ends up being focused on the walls of the enclosure because there's been so much work done to the body of the Sphinx itself.
Yeah.
And looking at the Sphinx, I know, you see repairs from dynastic Egyptian times, potentially even Old Kingdom Egyptian times. There is, famously the inventory stele talks about Khafre repairing the Sphinx and not making it. Kind of gets dismissed by the mainstream Egyptology. But you see repairs from Roman times and modern times. And then looking at it, I also, I know what's been done in modern times now. Like, there's a whole collar around the neck. Like if you go back and look at the old, early photographs of the Sphinx, its neck's much more narrow and the headdress isn't supported. So they added all this support underneath the headdress that's on the neck of it. And as you said, there's probably been plaster added to the body of it in places where it is just bedrock.
Yep.
So it's tough to say what is and isn't original bedrock there when you're looking at it. But, even the parts that some of it on the body, it does look pretty heavily eroded as opposed to the head of it, which I've always found to be a giant contradiction, particularly when you combine it with the explanation that is used by the standard model to tell you, well, the walls of the enclosure and the body of the Sphinx, it's all wind and sand erosion, right? That's the explanation. And I've always found that to be rather confusing because if you give that Sphinx, 20, 30 years, maybe even less, it's going to fill up with sand. Like the enclosure fills up with sand.
Right.
And you can see tons of photos of this back in the early days before it was cleared out for modern tourism, where it's, it's more or less up to its shoulders and neck in sand. So, okay, how do you do wind and sand erosion when it's probably for centuries, if not millennia, been filled up with sand? That's one point. And then the other thing I always find confusing is that the one part of the Sphinx that is out of the wind, that is definitely going to be subject to wind and sand erosion, its head and its face, that doesn't show the same erosion. It doesn't show really much erosion at all. Like it's pretty good for what it is. That's the part of it. And, I know people say, well, that part of the limestone's a much harder part of the limestone than the other layers of limestone, but still.
Which is part of the reason why it was a Yardang to begin with. That's why it was sticking up.
Yeah. There's a definite change in rock texture from the neck and shoulders up to the head. For sure. The rock is the head is darker, much darker stone. I don't know. You don't have to climb up there and look at it, but but obviously if it was protruding above as a natural feature, then that rock was hard. But still, like you're right. The heavy erosion on the body doesn't match the erosion on the head, and that doesn't make any sense. No. Yeah.
Nor the walls of the enclosure. And to me, it's just like you've got to account for thousands of years potentially that it's been buried, like parts of it, at least the enclosure.
Right.
So, the head has to, and given if you go with the assumption, let's say it was all carved around the same time, that's thousands of years more of wind and sand erosion that the head, even if it's harder stone, has suffered. And it just doesn't seem like it's suffering that type of erosion. And it's, again, we see that type of super heavy erosion, not just in the enclosure, but on other structures, the older megalithic structures around the whole plateau as well.
Yeah.
So I just think it all points to this idea that was the head recarved at some point? I think pretty obviously yes. It's there's the other aspect of it being out of proportion. The Egyptians were clearly masters of proportion.
Yep.
The statues that they made and the stuff that is 100% dynastic. I mean, they were master craftsmen and artisans. They wouldn't have got that proportionality so off with the Sphinx. It's just it doesn't look right with the size of the head. So
yeah, I mean, even the stripes on the headdress are still clearly visible.
Yeah.
Which that's a small feature that would be eroded if it was just as old as the enclosure. If the carving of the head was just as old as the enclosure.
Yeah. If it had suffered the same degree of erosion, it's just like again, and it's just these enclosures. That stuff fills up with sand pretty quick. I mean, we were walking around areas of it. Maybe this was in October when I was there, but you guys have seen it too. I've probably seen photos of it and I can show you. It's like, even from 20, 30 years ago, the archaeological work happening around the plateau, there's doors, and they put iron doors in on all of these little tombs that are cut into what was potentially a quarry areas off to the side of the causeway. And you go over there now and the doors are like literally there's 2 feet of the door still sticking up out of the sand. It's just filled up with sand.
Right.
I can tell you, like when we got into those catacombs at Saqqara, when I was last in there in 2016, so 5-6 years ago, I mean, you used to be able to go a lot further into that complex, and it's just filled up with sand. Like it's just these, this environment changes rapidly in the desert, and stuff fills up with sand. So it's just it wouldn't take long for that enclosure area to get buried without sort of constant maintenance, and then. Yeah, it was really cool, like seeing stuff. We saw those fossil layers, some really cool fossil examples.
Yes.
In the limestone, which is not indication of anything other than, it's limestone. But just seeing that stuff was really cool. I mean, it's a real privilege to get in it and stand in that whole enclosure, particularly on the day that we chose to go do all those missions.
Oh my God, yeah.
It was a zoo. It was
an absolute zoo.
Man. Yeah. Egyptian weekend, and I mean there were thousands of people. It took us God, what, an hour we went through the gates in the bus, and just to get around that loop in the parking lot of where the ticket area was,
took forever.
And then to drive over to the Sphinx must have been an hour just because of the traffic and the people.
Yep.
So it felt really cool and kind of special to be like, shepherded through and then dropped into the enclosure area where no one else could go. People are trying to get in the gate like, oh, can we come in? Like, no, you can't come in.
Yeah.
This is special permission.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
And then one guy jumped the fence and climbed down in there while we were in there. Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. Yep.
I'll just blend in. No
right.
one will notice.
I'm going to blend in.
Nope. Yeah. It was cool. But
yeah. So,
that whole, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say back to the Sphinx Temple again, because I brought this up at the beginning. So when you're standing in the middle, the main open area, I don't know what you would call it, the main courtyard area of it.
Yeah.
There are 8, maybe 10 of these. How many were there? They look like standing stones next to deep
About
pits.
that many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 on each side or something like that. Such a strange. I stood in the middle there just looking at those things, wondering what is this? What I couldn't, and I'm also imagining in my mind, like, okay, other temples, even just the Valley Temple across the way, like this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't look anything like this. And in some cases, it actually looked like, and I know this didn't work for all of them, but it looked like those stones used to lay down in those pits. Like they were kind of the same shape.
Yeah.
It was just weird. Like they had been stood up like they used to be down in there. I don't know. It was just a strange sight, the whole effect of it walking around in there. You're just like, what is this for?
Yeah.
Of course, which is something you do with pyramids, walking in the pyramids and some of the other temples, the Osirian as well. But I don't know. This one really struck me as very odd. It didn't even, I don't know. It didn't have the same kind of feel as the other temples did. The Valley Temple.
I feel like like you had mentioned before, that because the tile flooring was gone,
Yeah.
we're seeing the substructure.
The substructure. Yeah.
And it's very odd. Like, why did they dig down and make these deep square pits because they were setting giant granite columns there
yeah.
or something? Like,
Some of them were
socketing
sloped.
them in. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, the
There were
bottoms of them were strange.
Yeah, and then there were big nubs. Ben and I counted at least 5,
Yeah.
maybe 6 nubs sticking up out of the
Out of the
floor,
bedrock,
out of
yeah.
the bedrock,
The bedrock
yeah.
nubs.
Heavily,
Yeah.
heavily eroded. So they were, but they were clearly,
But you
Multiple-
socket
yeah.
a tile in.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very strange, and watch your feet, like you're walking around with a video camera, and then you're like, whoa, there's a
yeah,
giant hole right
there's
there.
a giant hole, and then there's a big nub sticking out.
Nub.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get the same sense. It does look like those blocks would fold down. It almost, they're right in front. It's like, you imagine they're lined up. There's these standing stones of limestone, and they have these pits in front of them that seem to match their shape as if
yeah.
they would fold. You just have this imagination of like, well, they fold down and the whole thing opens up. Or
That's
whatever.
right. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. If
That's
it was a
the key.
video game, you clearly.
Yeah,
push
Assassin's
those
Creed,
over.
it would open up.
That's
God damn
right.
it.
Exactly.
Let's work on this, see what happens.
That's
Yeah,
too
yeah,
easy, guys. Come on, it's
is, yeah.
too
Is it
easy.
too easy to solve that
Yeah,
puzzle?
knock over the 4-ton stone, see what we
You
got.
have to. There's
Get 'em
some kind of like symmetry to the design.
was.
Like they have a pit, and then they have a column next to the pit that's the same shape and roughly dimensions as the pit. But I mean, I know that others had mentioned that it looked like they would fold down in, but I'm just thinking, like, really, you're gonna fold the rocks in
Giant
and out
stone.
of the holes? I don't know. That this doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me. It just looks like some kind of symmetry that they're shooting for or going for with the way the substructure is supposed to hold the vertical columns.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I
There's definitely
obviously don't know
symmetry.
the answer, but yeah.
There's definitely symmetry, even in the dog leg, like the chambers towards the front of the Sphinx side, they were mirrored. You notice
Yes.
that? Like
Yeah.
those dog legs on each side, the left and the right, were the same. And some of the wall had fallen down on the further one,
Yep.
so it doesn't look like that. But those dog leg sort of chambers that don't go anywhere, they were the same on both sides.
That's right. Yeah. They acted like big sort of maybe pinchers that were going around the central area. Yeah. It was
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
a strange structure. And then, of course, there's the possibility that it was 2 floors. If the Valley Temple
Right.
also had a second floor, maybe this one did as well.
Potentially.
So we're just, we're once again, we're looking at the substructure below the basement, something like that. It's,
Well, I think it was cased in granite. It seems like there's evidence. There's granite, lots of granite blocks around it. Then you have all those cornice blocks as well. That it
Yeah.
may well have been originally cased in granite. There are chunks of granite laying around.
Yep.
And there were some granite blocks still in place, and you could see the exact same, round the corner kind of style of block making with what looks like that constant radius
Yes.
hole that's been drilled down to mark the corner.
Yep.
To get and cut those blocks in to the corner. Like that, we saw that, even though it's not in the Valley Temple, it's nice because they're still stacked up really high. But you got like maybe two courses of stones in a couple spots in the Sphinx Temple that you can see exactly the same thing. So it seems like the same methodology, but yeah, a lot more bedrock work going on in that one. I don't know. Yeah, it's a hole I want to dive into and dig into and do a bunch of research on and try and see what people have said about it over the years. And
yeah, you're planning on
see where it goes.
making a produced video about the Sphinx.
oh,
Temple,
for
right?
sure,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I want to share this with people. It's no one's seen. I mean, I posted some pictures of it online, and before the trip we ran into Hugh Newman and JJ Ainsworth.
That's right,
They
yeah.
were, they just finished a tour, and then we kind of had an overlap. So one of the days before the tour was, us 3, and then Hugh and JJ and Yusuf, and we went out and went to Saqqara for the day. It was great getting to meet Hugh and chat with him. But I remember posting up pictures after the trip about the Sphinx Temple, and one of the comments on Instagram, he was like, "Holy crap,
Yeah,
tell me you filmed the hell out of this. You're going to make a video." I'm like, "Yeah, I will, of course."
of course.
But because it's a lot of people have been wanting to get into that space and take a closer look for a long time. People that know about the plateau and the details of it, it's like that's always been a really mysterious area that very few people have seen, and certainly nobody seems to have documented really well that you
Yeah.
can go and look at.
Well, I hope we
video,
can
so I
get
was really
access to
pleased
it
that
again, because otherwise
We had the
it's-
chance to do that.
It's going to take me 120 years to scan the whole thing. I only got a third of it.
I'll see what we can
If
do.
it's going to take another 60 years before we can get back in there, I'm screwed, guys.
Yes. Well, that's not the only place we started. That was kind of the end of the trip. That was the last day. We did all those special permissions and the Great Pyramid, but we also started there at the start of the trip, right? We were at Giza, and the very first thing we threw people at was the Osiris shaft, and this is one of the mystery solved things that I wanted to get to. You remember we went down into the Osiris shaft, which is like you're 3 levels down. It's one of these other special permissions. You got to climb down these rickety ladders quite a ways into these chambers beneath the causeway. And there's a couple of boxes, actually 3 boxes down there, 2 on the middle level and 1 on the bottom level that's now all underwater. You can't see a damn thing down there anymore. But there's always been this mystery surrounding the dacite box that seems to have this black ooze.
Oh, no.
This goo. Huh?
Oh, I know this mystery.
This mystery, right? Yeah.
Did I solve this mystery?
You did. I think you did. Carl solved the
Dang
mystery.
My favorite shirt. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so there's been a lot of speculation over the years about this black goo, and I mean Brian Forrester managed to get a bit of it and have it tested, and he came back with like a bitumen or oil based substance, and we if you look at some of the earlier videos, and I know Russ, you made this joke, and it's just, and I've been telling people that for years too. It's like somebody needs to like lick this for science.
Yeah.
Yeah, because right. I mean it's pretty grotty. Like down there, it's like this is gnarly, weird looking stuff that's in this box and all over. So you got to lick it for science, right?
Charles
and of course,
that's right.
And of course, Chuck the geologist actually did.
Yeah. Because he's a geologist, and the geologists use the taste test. This is a thing they do.
Yeah. And so it's always this wondering, like, what is this black goo? What's this substance on this box? And you look around in that middle level in these alcoves, and over in the corner, one of the alcoves is this, this old ass water pump, this big sort of wheel-driven water pump, belt-driven thing that obviously I think must have been there since like the 80s or 90s, whenever Hawass had pumped the water out so he could go down there and film.
Yeah.
And Kyle, you were climbing around in there, and you kind of eventually made the comparison, right?
Yeah. I was checking out I climbed up on the box first, and then I was just like looking at this stuff. I'm like, what is the deal with this? And I was checking it out, got it on my hands, got it on my shirt, right in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And
first day.
Yeah, first day. And then I went over to the pump, and I was like checking it out, and it has a little, like a reservoir or whatever on it, and there's just that same stuff is all over it.
Yeah.
And so my thought was, oh, okay, like this pump requires oil, of course, and they probably had jugs of oil in here because the pump leaked. Obviously, it's all over the pump, which is what happens when you got a spinning wheel and a leaking oil. It just goes everywhere. It gets all over everything. Yeah. So they were probably storing jugs of this whatever oil that was used in this pump in the box or on top of the lid. And I can tell you,
spilling it everywhere.
Yeah, well, you're using big jugs of oil, and then you're setting them on the ground, and there's rocks and all this stuff, and you get a little pinhole in one of those.
Oh yeah.
It just leaks out all over the top of the box where you have the oil sitting. So it's all over. It ran over the lid. It runs down the side of the box. It goes inside the box. It's puddled up in there, and it's all over the pump.
Okay.
And it's the same stuff, and it's on my shirt. And I still have that shirt, so I could get it tested again.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a great explanation. I think that's a good explanation. Like they were using that damn thing as an oil reservoir or a place to store the oil. And just the way that.
Yeah, I thought for a minute that maybe they had the pump in the box, but then that didn't make sense. I was like, nah, they probably. That's when I started thinking they just had jugs of oil down there sitting on top of that box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were leaking.
Yeah. This is, so I don't want to go too far away from this conversation, but this is also what I started to think about the Serapeum boxes, because there's evidence in there, and we saw this, that, they're putting those, they're supporting the ceilings, they're putting those big metal framework into the alcoves, and then they were spraying foam insulation and other glues and caulks and stuff up there, and sometimes that stuff dripped down onto the boxes and ran down the sides.
Well, there's, in fact, they had these resin pads. Like, I don't know if you've seen a couple of places, like that metal framework that they've stuck in there is braced against the walls by these big bags full of some sort of resin, and it's dripping out. Like, and that's not to, it's the same thing as the liquid polish thing, which is a whole other topic, but there's definitely like residue and some stuff on the boxes, and I think it's coming from these resin pads. I actually saw it. For the first time, I actually noticed one of these big bags, and it's like leaking this resin stuff.
Yeah.
That's coming down and hitting the box. But yeah, I it's specifically the black goo in the Osiris shaft. I think we may have hit on the
mystery solved.
Explanation for it too. Yeah, mystery solved, bro. That's what I'm saying.
Wow. I missed that entire day.
I didn't realize that was okay. Yeah, well, that's cool.
Yeah, you did. You had a heart attack. And had a medical emergency with somebody else on the trip.
That's right.
Yeah, but I think, and I mean, it matches with Brian Forrester's testing and say it's like a bitumen or something, which is like an oil based. Yeah. I mean, that's the same base for that material. So
yeah, cool.
Anyway, interesting. Yeah,
lost a shirt, solved a mystery. All right.
Yeah.
Fair trade.
I guess.
Fair trade.
I asked the guy in the hotel when I did my laundry, I was like, you think you can get this oil stain out of this shirt? And he was just like, no.
No.
Damn it. All right. But yeah, if you're talking about the Serapeum, that's a major topic for me.
Yep.
We got to go in twice this time.
We did.
We went early on the trip to Saqqara early before the tour started with Hugh Newman and Yusuf. So that was great. We got to kind of run around in there a bit and do some investigation. And then we went back with the tour, and this was one of the special permissions, right? Mm-hmm. You guys got the back room opened, the part that's normally closed, with the big discarded box that's shoved off in the corner.
Yeah. Yep. That was another little surprise we pulled for them. And it's a place I've been trying to get back to since I was first in there in 2016. So I was, again, really happy to make it happen. Really cool. And it's Serapeum. I want to talk about that too, because as usual with all these investigations into it, kind of the thinking evolves a bit. And we even managed to do some science, which was cool.
We did manage to do some science. Kyle actually did quite a bit of science.
Really? I want to hear about the science y'all did. I was definitely in my own world down in there.
Well, I had a microscope, a USB microscope that was given to me by an undisclosed source, and it connects to the phone, which is very useful. It had its own internal light, so I took a lot of high magnification images of outsides and insides of box surfaces that we're going to get. Hopefully, we'll get them analyzed properly. But the point is to look for tool marks that can be matched up against known types of tool marks, stuff that you can't see with a naked eye. This microscope was capable of 40x and 1000x magnification, so I got images at both. I took some of the areas where the pooling is supposed to have happened with the polish-looking liquid, where you can kind of see the demarcation between the polished area or the liquid-covered area and the area that doesn't have it on there. I took some images of the chisel marks where the polished surface has been cut through, probably by later people chiseling glyphs into it, so you can see the clear, like there's almost a... It's hard to tell, just looking at the images, but it looks like they were breaking through a, well, I don't know if I should say, it looks like this. I don't know if this is actually what it is, but it looks like the chisel broke through a surface that has a thickness.
Yep.
With the microscope, which is very interesting. But again, that's just what it looks like. Me looking at the photos that were taken on my phone, we're going to get them properly analyzed, hopefully. Did get to, there was a lot of people in there, so we did get inside of a lot more boxes. Kyle made a proper map, right?
Yeah, that was the first day when we went with Hugh Newman. I went through and took photographs of each box, and while making a note and drawing a map on my, I mean, I know a map is available online, but to connect each alcove to a photograph
Yeah.
of the box,
Yep.
and with a couple of short descriptive things about the box to say, okay, this is this box and that's where it is important because really it's even though it's kind of a simple
It's a
cave
difficult
system,
layout
it's
to
like
understand.
you don't know where you are, and you come out, like if you're in an alcove and then you come out, you're like, wait, which way was I going? And
Yep.
very
Yeah.
often I would turn and start going the way, and it was like, no, this is the way I came. There's the box with the inclusion in it right there. Okay, I got to go the other way.
It's a huge place. Yeah. Even
Yeah,
though the map
it's very
is simple.
large.
It's
It is.
massive and the boxes are enormous and just, it's very confusing.
So having,
you lose track. So
Yeah.
it's nice. It's really cool to correlate like specific boxes to specific locations, and that is definitely needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that on the first day and got to get in a few boxes and, photograph the interior or take some video of the interior and tone in there and figure out what the resonant frequencies were. And then when we went back, I think on the first day I got in three. Or two.
2 or 3. Yeah. something like
I
that.
know, and from the first trip, I know a few of the boxes that I got into, but the other ones, I don't know which ones they were. That was
Right.
the problem.
Yeah.
So it was like, how am I supposed to know which ones I haven't been in yet?
Yeah.
Right.
So I still have to try to figure out which ones I got in the first time, but I know now from this trip that I got in.
You got in 7.
I got in 9 boxes because I got in 2 the first time, and then
Okay.
I got in 7 the second time.
The second time.
And I got in
Yeah.
5 last year.
Just don't know which 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really cool, and I now have a way of knowing which is which, and some of the ones I got into were very interesting, and I guess we can talk about that when we come back.
Oh, yeah. We need to take a break.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And we'll be right back with more of the Serapeum. And you were listening to another Red Sea jam, Sharm El Sheikh.
Funk on the Red Sea.
Funk on the Red Sea. What did we decide? This was like Texas, Australia, Egypt, desert outback rock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blues band.
Blues band. That's
Was
right.
it blues?
Yeah. Desert outback blues. Yeah. So
It's going crazy in the background. It's
yeah. Kids going nuts. The beach was crowded. And we were just out there jamming. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And a great, relaxation after the tour. We spent with 5 days with Yusuf in Sharm El Sheikh. We went to some museums. We looked at some other stuff, but mostly we chilled on the beach and we really got
Caught up
some
on sleep.
Yeah, caught up on sleep, got some downtime, but also really got to bond. The 4 of us hanging out, talking, chilling. No responsibilities except to, find lunch.
When is lunch?
Yeah.
Lunchtime?
Yeah.
Lunchtime?
Yusuf tried to kill us with really good food. I mean,
He did.
yes.
Yeah. When I finished dinner, he's like, when is breakfast?
Yeah. What is breakfast? And I can't even think about food right now. And then we'd go to places and he'd order the biggest thing that they had. We went to the
I love
seafood
it.
restaurant. He's like, there's this giant fish on display. He's like, I want that fish.
He's like, that is ours.
Yeah.
That is ours.
And then they cooked it and brought it to the table and this massive fish.
I love the style,
It was
dude.
so
He just
great, yeah.
orders everything for it. Like we
Biggest-
sit down and he's already talked to the chef.
Yeah. He doesn't want to talk to the waiters. He goes straight to the chef.
Chef
Yeah. And he's like, he is my cousin.
crosses his palm. And
Right.
dude, he had that place on lockdown.
He did.
Watching him work was,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like if you watch Yusuf when he's rolling around Giza, I mean, he just greases the skids everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And by what I mean is you're paying people. Like that's the culture there. But I didn't realize it also extended to like the vacation part. And he was just, I mean, we had the best spot on the beach.
Yep.
We had these waiters who always asked us, "What do you guys want? Cappuccino, Red Bull, beer, and you know, food. You want some shish kawuk? What do you want?" And and then he like literally hits up the chef and. You get the good reservation, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was all. And Mo also hooked it up. Like we get there and it's like all inclusive. You know, basically, you know, it's like
I asked the lady at the desk. I was just like, "Wait a minute, are you talking about beers and wine?" She was like, "Yes, it's all inclusive." I was like, "You might want to change your policy."
Yeah, you might need to change your policy.
You guys may be rethinking that policy after I leave this place.
This policy no longer applies to people from Texas.
I try to make sure that
all
they
the
fucking
Australians.
reconsider that policy.
Yeah.
God,
I did my best, folks.
I'm legitimately thinking like that's an optional extension you put on the tour.
Oh,
It's like
it's got to be.
come on down. I mean, it's like we're not like all gathering together and hanging out all day. Like it's just like we get 3 or 4, whatever it is.
Yeah.
A few days, all inclusive. Hang out here, do what you want. Like that's just part of the deal.
We went snorkeling. There's a reef. It was beautiful.
Oh,
fantastic. Dude.
Yeah. It was. I was all antsy about it because I was like, for me, it was the back end of 3 months of travel. We did the 2 Scabland trips. I had 2 nights at home. I went to Egypt in October. I came back. I was supposed to go to Sedona for a conference that got canceled, but then I had 2 weeks, and then I was back in Egypt again for this trip. So I was kind of going, damn it, why did I book this extra week? I'm not going to want to do it. And then it's coming up, and I'm kind of harassing Yusuf. I'm like, look, what are we going to do? Like, are we going to go to Dahab? We're going to go to Alexandria. We're going to go do this and see that and do this. And he's like, no, we chill out on the beach. And we did go to the museum, which is in Sharm, which is definitely worth doing.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
We also did a quad ride. We rode quads out in the desert, which was really cool, the mountains and stuff.
Yep.
But I tell you what, I wasn't unhappy when those days on the beach. That's the perfect way to end that sort of thing. Just chill out, relax. Yeah.
Everything included, weighted on hand and foot.
Yeah.
Snorkeling on the reef.
It was
jamming on the beach.
Yeah,
We were just pampered.
Yeah.
It was like,
I could have spent a few more days there.
Yeah.
Would not have been a hardship. Yeah. Beautiful.
That first dinner that we had, though, was hilarious.
oh my God. Yeah, because everything was closed when we got there, and they were like, well, there's this one restaurant that's out in the mall.
Yeah. That's part of the all-inclusive thing.
Yeah, it's part of the all-inclusive.
Part of the deal.
So we go there, and Yusuf just orders everything. Here we go. Beers, freaking wine, all the food, go. And then the guy's just like, wait a minute, you're paying. And he's just like, no. We're not paying. It's all inclusive, and they have this whole thing in Arabic that we can't understand. And they go back and forth, and then the guy leaves, and then we're like, "What happened?" And he's like, "Don't worry." And then they come back. It happens multiple times, and it gets more and more heated.
They switched to English at one point. Yusuf's like all inclusive. He said they sort of did it in English for a minute.
Yeah.
They were getting annoyed.
Yeah.
And he's like, I sense a tourist trap here.
Yeah.
He's like, I sense a tourist trap. They were trying to get us to pay. And Yusuf won. The guy.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yusuf
He
totally
absolutely
won.
won. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like I was like,
What did he say?
No. At the very end, the waiter is looking at me and just he's like, all I need you to do is sign this paper. And I'm like, okay. And Yusuf grabs the pen, and he grabs the paper, and he slaps the paper down on the table, slaps the pen on top of it, and just stares at the guy. he's like, you will sign nothing. Yeah.
You want it? You know his room number? Write it down yourself. Come on.
Yeah.
Like,
Don't write your name down. Don't sign anything.
Yeah.
Don't put a number on there. Nothing.
So we left, and the guy ran past us and
Was going towards
to
the hotel, yeah.
We never heard a word about it.
We never did. We never heard a word. Yeah. What did he tell us? He told the guy at one point, he told us that he told the guy, he was like, don't piss off the Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Piss off the Americans. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
it was
it was
great.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that late night start, and he's like, I sense a tourist trap here.
Yeah.
It is a touristy area. It's actually a really nice area. Like, it's very touristy. It's this little area in Sharm where all the hotels are, and it's like a little avenue. It's like a mini Vegas at night or whatever.
Yeah,
or
mini
Atlantic
Vegas,
City or something.
outside mall, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had shows
It's
at
nice
night.
little shops and fountains and music, and
Yep.
very clean, very upscale,
Yep.
swanky, you might say.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was cool though. It was
But the
that whole
food,
trip, yeah,
the food was really good.
Yeah.
oh man, the seafood was outrageous
It was
like
just-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you? He was like, they're trying to scam us. He's like, but I am a hustler. Right? He's like,
Don't hustle a hustler.
Oh, dude.
Don't hustle a
So we go back to the. This is so great. We go back to the hotel, and I'm like, let's go to the fucking bar. And so we go over to the bar, and it's closed.
oh man.
And I'm like, wait, like, what's the deal? We're looking around, like, is there any other open bars? And they're like, no, they all closed or whatever. And the guys are there, like,
Cleaning
closing
up.
up, cleaning and stuff. And so we're like, Yusuf's like, can we buy a bottle of wine? And they're like, no, we're closed. And he's like, can I bribe you for a bottle of wine? And they keep telling him no. They're like, what? Like
Yeah.
what? And finally, Yusuf, in the middle of the lobby area of the hotel, he's like, I am trying to bribe you for a bottle of wine.
says it really
He's like,
loud.
so
It
loud.
echoes in there. It's hilarious, dude.
Oh, dude. It's so genius. I
Oh
love it.
man, it was great.
And they wouldn't
We
do
did
it.
not get a bottle of wine.
No,
We didn't.
that night.
They
It was like 1 o'clock or 1:30. It was whatever.
Yeah.
It was late.
Yeah.
We just got in and it was like, whatever. We'll
I'm like, man,
get the wine tomorrow.
I've got to try this in the United States.
yeah.
Start handing
I'm
out
going
20s
to,
everywhere.
yeah.
Start trying to bribe people for
Like when I
stuff.
really need something, I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm trying to bribe you for this thing right now.
That's what he says. Everyone he goes up to is, yes, I'll make him my cousin.
That's
Don't worry."
right. Yeah.
And he's not like, introduces like, I want you to meet my cousin. It's
Yeah.
like the waiter at the staff or the chef at the seafood restaurant. He is my cousin. Don't worry.
This
He'll
is
bring
my
us the good
cousin.
stuff. And he just like goes and orders. He just skips the whole ordering. But he goes and talks to the chefs and tells them what he wants,
Yep.
how he wants it, and then they
Yeah,
bring it.
we
It's-
use the waiter
yeah.
just for like, give us beers and
Beer and
silverware
wine.
and stuff.
Yeah.
the food just keeps turning up. You're like, holy crap! I thought we were done. There's like next course comes
Nope,
out.
next course. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we ate the biggest damn lobster I'd ever eaten like
Oh,
that
yeah.
last night. And he was all fired up. It was also the back end of a lot of work for Yusuf. He's looking forward to it too, like
Yeah.
to chill. And he's like, we're going to find the best goddamn seafood restaurant in Sharm, and it's all on the Red Sea, so the seafood's amazing. And
so good. Oh my
and he
God.
just was like, we're going and finding this place, and it was just, oh, dude, it was. And I love the guy. He's super generous. I mean, you can't pay for a damn thing around him.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, he's like that on the tours too with people. Like people want stuff. It's like people get
Mo's
gifts
the
all the
same way.
time. We
Yeah.
buy the extra tickets. It's just, yeah, it's
yeah,
just,
most the same way.
I do want to mention that because it's just like Mo and Yusuf, I think it's just luck. I feel very lucky to have fallen in and partnered up with these guys in Egypt because, we had people on the tour that when we're flying, taking these domestic flights around, they're hearing other tourists and other groups and they're complaining about this or that in the schedule.
Yep.
And we heard that from other people. We're sitting around in the cafe at Valley of the Kings and we were chatting to some people from another tour and they're like, oh, it's just like, it's get up early, go here for half an hour, get on the bus, go to the next place for half an hour. And
Yeah.
none of that happens without trip. Like it's just people get looked after so well by the staff in Egypt. With the Kemet School and Select Egypt, which is the travel agency that kind of runs all the logistics for us. It's just, man, they do such a good job. And I'm just, I couldn't be happier with the way that people get treated.
I agree, man.
Yeah.
It's over the top.
It is.
Just
It's like
really,
it's like red carpet all the way. Just
Yeah.
and very
everything is taken care of.
very familial. It's
Yeah.
like you become like Yusuf says, like, yeah, we're cousins, we're brothers or whatever.
brothers,
It's
yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
I can see the way they interact with the people that come on the tour, and it's just like everybody gets this sort of familial sort of relationship, and it's just beautiful. It's so good. They really they run a tight ship.
Yeah.
They take
They
care
do.
of everything, and they're awesome people on
Yeah.
top of that. And it's just
They really are.
so wonderful.
Well, and that was the other thing that was a massive privilege for me. There's like, a few of us got to go and we, we got to go and have dinner at one of our
Oh,
tour
yeah.
guides'
That's
houses.
right. Yep.
that
Mr.
blew my
Badawi.
mind.
So his house. So there was a few of us. We couldn't take everyone. His house is set up. They have a big family. You can host like 10, 15 people. So we kind of went out one night and went to his house, and it was the hospitality and the welcoming nature of it. It's just everything is laid out for you, and the food was just, I mean, it was one of the best meals I've ever had. It was unbelievable. And I was really, and just like you said, the hospitality, and those guys really care. The most thing they care about is that people feel good about it, that they enjoy their time in Egypt, that they go away with it as a being a real positive experience. And that's more important to them than money or any of these other things. I mean, everybody's, it's all a business at the end of the day, but it's a livelihood, but they're 100%, their priority is like, we're here for people and to make them,
and it shows,
walk away with the warm and fuzzies, and it does show
100%.
Yeah.
That experience was amazing. I agree. It blew my mind.
Yeah, and they laid out a legit, like, picturesque banquet. I mean, the table was stacked, massive amounts of food.
It's unreal.
Pigeons and ducks and the barbecue beef and just all this, the little vine leaves,
stuffed peppers and vine leaf wraps,
piles of rice and bread. It was amazing. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. and Egyptian
now,
style
who's
too,
hungry?
which was the best part. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys want a break for dinner?
Just slap a duck and tear its leg off and go for it. Like,
that's right.
That's the Egyptian style. It was great. Like, we're hands on. And, it was fantastic.
I have to say this though, this concept of the family, I learned from that experience. Like because we look at the buildings when we're driving through Cairo, and there's always these columns sticking up out of the tops of the buildings, and there's rebar sticking up out of the top. And we were told, in some cases, that this is because they don't finish a building, because if they finish it, then they get taxed and all this kind of stuff. I heard various different stories, or that they're being torn down, and maybe some of this is true. But in talking with some of the Egyptians this time, they were saying, in many cases, they build the house and they build the next story up and leave the columns and the rebar there, because when the next generation of the family or someone marries in the family and they're going to start a new family, they just build out that next floor and and leave the columns on the roof of that, and that family moves into that floor. And they just keep doing this.
Mahmoud told you this, Tito?
I can't remember who told me. It might have been Yusuf. But yeah, so when we went to the dinner, it looked like we were walking into a restaurant on the bottom floor of what almost looks like a small hotel.
Yeah.
It was pristine. Tiling. Pristine. It was amazingly
beautifully done.
Waiting room.
Giant family in there. And then the building across the street is their, like, cousins. They're related. The buildings next to the house were more distant family members.
Yeah.
And that really struck me about their culture.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's
how deeply important the family is, and they're all together.
So you can kind of see in the way that they treat each other, like Yusuf does. Like, we were joking about how he makes these people his cousin and his brother or whatever after that. But that's just kind of the way they grow up.
Yeah.
In dealing with each other.
Yeah.
You are around your family and extended family all the time.
Right.
And it's a beautiful thing. The way they are with each other is just, I don't know. To me, it really, really is wonderful, and I love it. I want to go back right now.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, and that was the other I mean, in Luxor, like, Yusuf was describing the character of the men. Like, this was, you remember him? I don't know if you were on the bus. He was talking about this, that they were, like, if the idea of being a man in Luxor, and it's like, if you were to look up to role models and the way that's all structured, and particularly around that Luxor region, like the reputation of the men there, it's honorable, respectful, caring, respect the women, respect your neighbors, respect everybody else. I mean, it's they live a different life to what you do in the West, but they are just, and it's the same thing. Like, people think Egypt's dangerous and all of this. It's not remotely like that. There's no street crime there. Like, you don't have problems with, gangs or that type of street crime at all.
Yeah.
Because it's the community gets involved with that at every level. Like, it's not, they're not relying on police to take care of it if and when that sort of thing does happen. It's very rare. But yeah, you can see that, and in particular in that Luxor area, they say that's the that's what they teach the boy. Like that's, if you want to be a man, like that's what it means you have to be honorable and respectful and be a friend to people, even in hard times, not just a friend in good times. Like give them the goddamn clothes off your back. And that's the sense you get. Like they would help you out no matter what. So yeah, it's a real honor, and it was a real honor getting to go to their house and to Butterwy's house and spend time with them. I love those guys. Like I've spent, a few trips with them now and gotten to know them. And yeah, it's an honor. It's certainly a lot to be said for that way of life, I think, like you said.
Yeah.
Kyle. Like
We've definitely fallen in love with the culture and the people and the style and the sort of magnificent controlled chaos that is all of Egypt.
Oh my God.
Fantastic.
I love that.
Oh, even their history too. I mean, that day we spent at the end of the trip, we went to Islamic Cairo and we went to all these mosques.
Yeah.
And my mind was blown. I mean, it was, I've been to the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican and stuff, but I tell you what, the architecture in these almost Gothic mosques and the domes, and it's absolutely wonderful. And it's almost something I want to include on future tours because, not only just for that aspect of the artwork, it's profound and it's absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. These entire structures made from calcite. There's also tons of recycled Egyptian material, like ancient Egyptian material,
remnants of granite columns reused, and just like stuff that are obvious artifacts. That was one of the reasons why Yusuf wanted to take us. That was an excellent part of the trip. Yeah.
And there are cow days.
There were lots of cow days. That's true.
I love the thing about the mosque. One of my favorite things is this central fountain.
Yeah.
You come into the mosque and you go in, and it opens into like this big, beautiful courtyard, just giant courtyard. And then there's the, is it 3 or 4 the alcoves that are the schools?
The 4 schools.
The 4 schools.
Yeah.
Surrounding this courtyard. And in the middle is this round, ornate, beautiful, gigantic fountain structure thing that has these columns, these very short columns all around where you can sit and put your feet in the trough of water at the edge of the fountain and wash your feet. And of course, there are no shoes inside the mosque, but the shoe is not supposed to touch the surface. So they actually sell you these little bags you can put over your shoe, which is interesting. But we took the shoes off in most cases. But yeah, just looking at this fountain, and you can see the worn, polished surface of the small column that was for the seats for all of the asses that sat there to wash their feet and just polish this piece of but it's so cool. I don't know, there was just something about that. It's like, take your shoes off when you come into this place.
That's right. That's another mystery solved, right? That's how you polish this hard stone. Thousands of years of asses.
Well, it was calcite, right?
Right, yeah.
Not too hard.
I know. Trying to make a joke here, man.
Yeah, it was pretty good. That's how they did it.
Well, before is this segment's now half over? Let's go back to the therapy.
I know.
We're
Yeah, sorry. We sidetracked.
There's so much. You can't do it in one show, so we're going where we're going. You can't do it all in one show. We're going to do many shows about this, but
But we were talking about you making the map of the Serapeum and what you were doing.
So I already talked about the map. I would like to just state this, and I'm going to go through this footage and the pictures and stuff later on the show. We could do a video maybe, but the boxes that I got into this time were very interesting. There were some that were very precise and just pristine, polished interior surface, seemed like very square edges. I didn't bring in any kind of precision tools to measure the angles and all that kind of stuff. I was mainly going in to just observe and also check the resonant frequencies.
And you're getting the frequencies for measurement purposes, basically, right?
Yeah, comparison purposes, right? To compare the boxes to each other.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way that I can compare the dimensions of the box to each other.
Yeah.
If I took a laser measuring device and stuck it on one wall and shot it at the other wall, how do I know that if I moved it 2 feet down, it would be the same? Or
Yeah, and
whatever,
also
right?
the walls are reflective, and it's kind of a pain, right? Yeah.
It can be.
Yeah.
So the point is with the resonant frequency, it just gives you a general average. This is the size.
Yeah.
But the main thing I want to point out is that the interior of these boxes that I saw were definitely purposefully left out of symmetry. Like one of them had this giant lump on the inside of the box, like at the floor level, like the walls coming down straight, and then suddenly it just juts out and there's this big chunk that was never cut out. And it looked like someone later had taken a hammer and chisel to this lump on the inside of this box and tried to cut it out.
of there.
And I have video to show this, but I mean, this had to have been done later. This is my hypothesis, that someone later came along and tried to cut this chunk that was left in out, because there are polished surfaces around it, but then there's just like obvious hammer and chisel marks on this huge lump left in. Another box that I got in, the one that had the corner piece left in on the inside corner, it was just like never completely cut out. It also had across the entire other bottom side wall or end wall, a 4 to 6 inch piece in the bottom corner that it didn't cut to the bottom of the corner. It left like a bevel
Right.
on the inside.
Yeah.
Polished beautifully. I checked the outside. The outside of the box is cut away on that corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing you were saying, that I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. So the on the other side, where it was just the right inside bottom corner, so it's this sort of triangular piece or part of the stone that is not cut away to make the three axes meet at 90-degree angles to each other. It's a pretty big chunk. You could put your foot on it. That's how big that they didn't take out of that three-way corner there. On the outside of the box, that corner
is
cut
missing.
off.
Yeah, it's missing.
So it's telling me that like they're leaving that purposefully on the inside because they know they cut away some flaw in the stone on the outside.
They require a certain thickness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also,
that's freaking weird.
Yep.
Also, I was inside a box that had giant scoop marks taken out of the floor in multiple places. That one of them was like so big I could put my entire foot into it and it would almost come up to my ankle bone. That's how big the scoop was out of the floor of the inside of the box. And there were multiple scoop marks out of the floor of the inside of this box. So it's like Chris Dunn says, like the advanced ability of their tools allowed them to make precision cuts, to make precision angles, but they didn't have to do that. And they didn't actually, what they cared about was something else.
Something else.
Even though they could make some of them, because then I'd get in one and it's just perfect. All the angles, all the way to the corner, three axes, just, I mean, pristine down to like, you know, like Chris Dunn says, it's like, what is the radius in that three-way corner? It's so small.
Yeah. Tiny.
Maybe 1/8 of an inch. I don't know. I just didn't have time to do all the things. I think the most important thing was making the map and getting just the footage generally of inside of each box and kind of figuring out which one's which.
It's such an interesting observation. I think, like you said, it seems like that correlation between like these divots and things on the inside that seem to match what's happening on the outside. Like you said, Russ, it's like they were going for a certain material thickness for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. And there are, I mean, that's the thing you're saying, like, and I've seen some of these, they're unfinished, whether it's unfinished or it's deliberate, like some of it may be unfinished. We know that it was unfinished because we have unfinished boxes.
Yep.
And you have this material thickness that there are some boxes like the exploded box that Marriott blew up, I mean, that are pristine and they're flat and they're sharp corners. And there's plenty of places in there where you measure where measurements been done either by Chris Dunn or Ahmed Adley and other people where they show you these, perfect angles and things like that. But like you said, that may not have been the specific objective. Like if they can make it thick enough and perfectly flat and square enough, then they can do it. But yeah, it seems like they're going for something else. Like they're going for a thickness or a solid. The other observation I make about that place is that it also seems, and this is the scoop marking, the scoop discussion, is that they're going for solidity. Like they're just, these boxes have to be solid. Like that was why it's so cool to get back in to see that Cambusis box, the giant big black one that's in the closed off area that they parked into this. They literally, it's just the craziest thing, this box. And this is where it's like, yeah, you guys with your pulleys and capstans and pivoting off a post and all these ideas. Like this thing is parked in a corner. Like it's literally into a corner.
Show me the capstans that can get that thing into that corner.
Well, show me any post that where's the hole for the post that you apparently pivoted a 70-ton block of granite around, but didn't just knock it over straight away. Like, this is not something you can do with some of those models. But the reason they parked it there and they never quite finished it is because it developed this giant crack in it, like a big, a big crack in the front face of it. That splits the stone, but the box is perfectly serviceable if you were to use it as a box for some bull bones or whatever. But I think because it developed this crack, they just said, well, this is ruined. We can't use it. Shove it in the back corner and forget about it.
Yeah.
This
is the thing that really blows me away is that, like, if they needed the integrity to be such that they scooped out cracks, that they left interior dimensions odd because the exterior dimensions had to be cut away to get rid of flaws in the stone. Why did they need to be polished on the insides and out? Like, if you're going to put this lid on it and no one's ever going to see what's inside, why does it need to be polished in there?
Well, why does it need to be solid? Like, none of these things are requirements for any of the stated standard model purposes.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I can understand a crack where, let's say, if you're going to put a liquid in there that's a very, very thin liquid that would actually go right through that crack and come out, right?
Right.
It would come out if it was thin enough.
Yeah, the box would leak. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. But this polish is the polish necessary to see the cracks? Because I know, like with steel, like when you're working with hydraulics and stuff, that's one of the things you would do is clean the surface and smooth the surface out, and that's when you can begin to see the cracks,
the flaws,
and the flaws in the stone. Another way to see the flaws in the stone is to spread some liquid on it, and then you'll see it seep into that crack.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's mind-boggling.
The why question, like, why does it need to be solid? Why does it need to be polished? Why does it need to be perfect where it's perfect? Or, maintain a thickness where they're maintaining a thickness on it. I don't know. It just, again, this all screams function
that's what
to me. I come back to that whole relationship between precision and function. There's plenty of examples of astonishing precision in these boxes and in others. There's a strong relationship between, you don't develop precision and the capability for precision unless you're chasing some functional benefit from it. If it's artistic or ceremonial, you color with it, you're more or less coloring within the lines and you're fine. But that's the whole nature of precision and how it's evolved in the modern world too. I mean, that was all developed in the pursuit of function. It was so we could make cannons shoot straighter. We could make, chronometers that kept time accurately and all of these things. That's the development of modern precision.
Yeah.
The same thing applies to this stuff. You don't develop those capabilities unless you're changing or you're chasing some functional return. And Russ, we were talking about this in the break, but it's like what annoys me about this whole discussion and the back and forth that seems to happen around the Serapeum is that we only have a handful of measurements to go on.
Yeah.
We have Chris Dunn's measured them in a few spots. I know Ahmed Adley's measured them in a bunch more spots. He's an Egyptian engineer, makes great videos. They're in Arabic. They're still worth watching. He's gone in there with precision tools and measured in a lot of places and shows you, the perfect angles and flatness of stuff. And you can use the, BAM and Patrice Poyard. They went and did stuff with surface roughness meters, which gives you an indication of the flatness of the surface over a small area. But there's just like a handful of measurements. What we actually need to have happen is have these things be scanned accurately with proper scanners that cost whatever $70,000, $100,000, like the work that Patrice has done in the Barabar caves in India, because the results of those scans are absolutely astonishing and mind blowing, and it's certainly the basis for a lot of further study. And Russ, you were saying that, while we were running around in there playing this hide and seek game with some of the keepers while we're in the actual alcoves, hiding behind the boxes, trying to take microscope pictures of either like these fine machining marks or tool marks or bits of the liquid polish. I mean, you're saying you got pissed off and angry, like this is.
Yeah, I got pretty annoyed because I'm hiding behind a box. I've got this microscope connected to my phone, and like people are walking up there, and I'm trying not to get busted, but I'm also trying to do some kind of scientific investigation of these boxes, what I can, and I'm just like, why am I having to do this?
Yeah,
this is annoying. Like, I shouldn't have to do this. Like, I'm hiding and trying not to get busted, and just trying to understand these things properly, and it's just incredibly annoying. Like, I know that those keepers that are in there, they're not trying to stop me from doing science. They don't want to lose their jobs,
They're
right?
doing their job.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose their job.
Right. So, but there's a whole hierarchy of things happening there, and in the end, I'm like, why am I even having to do this? This should be done properly by people with correct equipment, like Ben was saying, with good $100,000 scanners. This all should have been done already, but because it's like there's this mainstream narrative that we know what these are, so there's no further science need be done, right? And it's just ridiculous. And so we're running around, hiding, climbing around, sweating, trying not to get busted, trying to run a tour at the same time as trying to do proper science. Kyle's jumping in and out of boxes. I'm jumping in and out of boxes. Ben is jumping in and out of boxes. And the whole thing is like, there's this kind of stealth aspect to it that's just really annoying. Like, why am I hiding with a microscope? You
were just grumpy that day. I think it's great.
I mean, yeah. On one hand, it's kind of fun, but on the other hand, I'm like, why do I have to do it this way?
Yeah.
Russ and Ben are notorious for being grumpy. I figured this out.
I'm glad somebody else has been added to that team.
Yeah. Oh,
I blaze him multiple
I get
times,
grumpy.
folks.
Yeah.
I see Ben. Oh, he's getting grumpy again. All right, here we go.
He's up the back getting grumpy.
Damn it, all right, I'm going to fucking get a tea.
Yeah, I'm templed out.
When's lunch? Templed out, yeah. Lunchtime? Is it lunchtime yet? Let's go to lunch. I've seen it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. The gist of it is that this should have been done
right
professionally.
And what's pissing me off is that is not that it's not fun to do it this way, but at this, we're doing Indiana Jones stuff. But what's pissing me off is that it should be already done.
Yeah, that's
what's pissing me off, and the fact that we have to run around and sneak around and hide doing it because we're only allowed to be in there as tourists. And any like Yusuf says to the people at the beginning of the tour, any sign that you're not being touristy, and they're going to start getting suspicious. Like that guy in the Sharm el Sheikh Museum when we were paying all that attention to the Horus statue. He's like, what are they doing? Why are they looking at the statue? And Yusuf is like, it's a beautiful statue. What's wrong? And they're fascinated by it. Now, of course, Kyle's trying to scan it, and I'm taking images of the polish and stuff. So the dude,
I scanned it.
Yeah. So the dude,
but he's like, no video,
right?
No video.
Yeah.
The videos. I'm like, no, I'm not taking video. I'm not taking
video.
10,000 photographs.
Yeah, this is not a video. I'm scanning it with lasers. This is a hugely different thing. But that's the point. Like, the guy got suspicious because we took a scientific interest in that object, and he could tell the difference. Yeah. He could tell the difference in like a tourist looking at it and the way we were looking at it, and that's why he got suspicious. And that's the root of the problem there.
It is, and it's something that's annoyed me, and I constantly call for it in my videos too. It's like this. There are so many low-hanging fruits of non-destructive, completely benign, and completely achievable experiments, measuring, like scans, these things that can be done to shed light on these mysteries and to peel those onion layers back a bit further, understand a bit more about how precise is it? What's the comparison between all of these boxes? What's the relative internal dimensions? What is the overall flatness of the surfaces, and how many of the angles are perfect and how many are like, it's just, these things all should be done. It's just, I think there's like, there's a blockage in there because, like you say, we've kind of closed the case on it. We know what they were for, therefore no more science needs to be done. And people, I think, unfortunately in the academic realms are a little too afraid of stepping outside of the core tenets of that dogmatic sort of belief system, to risk their jobs or careers. And those are the people with the permissions and the capabilities to do it and the budgets to do it. And we can't talk in too much detail about it, but we had a good example of that on this tour. We had some people that were with us, and I mean, very interested in these topics, very intelligent, well-placed people in very interesting fields that really couldn't be included or named or shown to have been taking an interest in this field, because if they were, it would threaten their academic positions and their current sort of occupations to some degree. Because if they were associated with this quote unquote fringe beliefs in science, and it's legitimate science that's trying to happen, and trying to figure out some of the answer to this stuff, but it's like they're real careful to we can't be included in this because being seen to be doing so would threaten our kind of reputation our livelihood and in these academic circles. And that's what happens. I read a great article that was written about Hancock's thing. We're seeing it now, with Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse series, where it's just the kickback that's happening in there, and we're starting to see some articles being written about the kind of dogmatic response of mainstream academia in this space. And I mean, I know a lot of disciplines of science suffer from this, but in particular in this one, it's like, man, there is a real dogmatic core of this story that is very central to it. And if you start threatening that story or bring up topics and want to investigate and go in lines that could potentially threaten this story, then you are immediately ostracized and people lose their jobs. I mean, there's a number of examples of that exact thing happening. It happened to a scientist in Tiwanaku when he went and looked at confirming some of Poznansky's sort of astronomical dating of that site. That guy lost his job when he confirmed some of his readings and conclusions. I mean, these things happen, and it's sad that it's down to this type of guerrilla style science that can only happen piecemeal with kind of consumer grade equipment, because I can't afford to bring a $70,000 scanner to Egypt. Not that I'd be able to get it in or use it effectively, because they'd stop you from doing it. There's a real bottleneck here, and the people with the permissions and capability to do it aren't doing it, I think, for fear that it might threaten this story. Some of the conclusions might threaten this story. That's at the core of the whole tube drill thing. Like, the reason there's a tilted photograph in one of the textbooks and that nobody will ever admit that there is in fact spiral grooves on some of these drill cores, it's because the implications of that threaten this whole primitive tool narrative story that's going on in ancient Egypt, and it means that some of their conclusions are wrong. Like,
same thing happened with the Sphinx enclosure erosion. I mean, you can see it happening over and over again. Yeah, for sure.
It's frustrating.
I have so much to say. First of all, Johnson, you're not going to get fired, oh boy. Don't worry. We were just drinking beers in Egypt. Anyways, a couple of things. One about the precision in the Serapeum, as you pointed out. Like, there's only been a couple of measurements taken in places that can show over a certain area or linear length that there is very precise and flat surfaces and right angles. It is not the case in every box. I was in one box that was like really wonky. Like, the back wall was obviously tilted towards me, and the whole thing was skewed. And my point is, in saying this, is that when it comes to precision, if you can do it, if you can make a precise flat surface and precise right angles on all these different axes, and then parallel walls and all that kind of stuff, that in and of itself, even if it's one object out of all the objects, shows it's almost zero chance you would do this by hand by accident, because of the size of these things and how much surface you have to flatten inside that space. So that's what illustrates the advancement of the tools. And yet they didn't need it to be precise. They just could be precise when the stone itself allowed for it, because what they cared about was this integrity of the stone. So that's the point I want to make about that.
That's a great point. And
well, hold on. Let's take a break. We've gone way long, and then we'll finish. We got one more segment.
Yeah. Okay.
I had another point and I forgot it.
Go ahead.
We're going
I was
long
just
on
gonna-
purpose. But I'm override. What?
Okay. No, I was going to say that, yes. I like that's an observation, and I've learned a lot about the Serapeum since I first made some content on it and talked about it. It was one of my earliest, like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. It's one of the reasons I want to revisit that site in content and write a bunch about it again and dive into it. And I've been swapping emails with Chris Dunn about it too. And he's also, he's writing a new book and he's getting into a bunch of these different topics as well, and revisiting this as well. Because I think you're right. Like there's examples of extreme precision, and they certainly seem to have had the capability for it. But that may not have been what they were shooting for. Is a fantastic observation. Like that's not. Having this thing be perfectly square and flat may not have been the ultimate goal. It might have been something to do with thickness and solidity. And if they could do it where the stone allowed it, they did. But if they didn't, they worked around it. Seems like they worked around it because that functional outcome they were chasing, they could achieve.
I think they were in a
that
hurry.
result.
Yeah, that's yes.
You get the idea that
Yeah,
they were
could've
kind of in
been
a
in a
hurry. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, and that they eventually were interrupted, right? Because it's.
that's right. They were in a hurry and they didn't finish.
Yep.
Let's take a break.
All right.
I'm calling it.
You are.
You guys are
I can't
assholes.
override the second call.
Override cancel. Veto only works once.
We'll be right back. The Red Sea Dread Van Kerkwick Band.
That's it.
Well, this is the final segment, and it's hopefully going to be a long one because there's a lot to say here. We're just going to let it go until we decide to wrap. We went along on that last one, but yeah, it's deserved. We hadn't done a show in freaking 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So, oh, good.
I haven't done a podcast in about 4 months.
You've been traveling a lot.
Yeah.
We told them
You got lots of material.
way back in the beginning
Yeah,
that we'll go look at stuff and they won't get episodes.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Promises delivered.
Yes. Promises delivered, right.
Promises kept. Yeah.
I have to admit, I have a terrible confession to make, folks. I wussed out, and I did not climb the well shaft in the pyramid. Just want to get that out there. I'm ashamed. Yeah. But
Oh, well.
maybe next time.
Yeah.
I have a lot of excuses, but I
We've
won't
seen it,
bore you
though.
with those. Yeah, I know. First
We did
excuse
see it.
I will explain, and that is Ben showed me a video
Our buddy Christian.
climbing that shaft.
Yep.
Holy crap. Fuck you, bro. That's one of the reasons why I didn't do it, because I was like, damn, that looks really hard. But thank you for doing that, actually.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to do it. Just maybe put the Great Pyramid on the front end at some point, so I'm not worn out, all batteries dead.
Yeah.
I'm doing 15 pull-ups in the Serapeum trying to get out of the
I
damn
know,
boxes.
dude.
Yeah.
Dude, that was the other thing. 7 boxes in and out, and like not only that, but you have to climb down the structure of a lot of those to
Yeah,
get
into the alcove.
and
Yeah.
like hurry and be quiet.
Yep.
Yep. People don't realize how deep those things are.
Dude,
like,
yeah.
They are
some of them
deep,
are
and-
10 feet deep or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're deep, and it's man, I was worn out after that.
Well, I have a couple of before we move on from the Serapeum, there was a couple things that I was thinking about just in general, looking at the state of all the boxes, and you can see this when you look at pictures of it. The placements of the lids in general on these boxes. So there was one that was never opened; it was closed, and that's the one that was blown up in order to look inside, and it was empty. we're told. The rest of them, the lids have the appearance of having been slid off a bit to get access to the interior space. What's interesting to me is that if those boxes had something in them that was large, you wouldn't be able to get it out of there with the lids the way they are. So it seems like, and this may be not true, but it seems like, I was thinking about this, that maybe they were full of small things if they had stuff in them. So the lid gets slid off and you can kind of imagine this. The lid is sitting on the box and it has all this inertia. So you set up some kind of system to pull on the lid to get it to move, and then it slides a bit, and that's it. That's all they did. And each lid has moved a certain amount. Some of them are kind of turned a bit. Some of them have slid straight forward or towards the back, just whichever direction. But it seems like they moved the lids once, and it stopped it there just so they could look inside the box. And some of the lids have only been slid so much that you can't even really climb down in there. Like at least one of them is it's a tiny crack.
Yeah, I got in one that I barely fit into, and I was like, man, I'm kind of worried about this, but I did it.
You got in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for sure, there's one that you can't. Like, there's one that I walked on the top of, and I was looking down on it. There's a small. It's only open a fraction. Like, I don't think. It'd be difficult to get. You might put Sophie down in there, but
yeah, like a kid,
don't know about
maybe.
Us, yeah.
Right. So in other words, there's not going to be anything like. In other words, the implication to me was that somebody opened all these boxes and they were all empty.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because if there was something bigger.
If there's something big in there, all the lids would be on the floor next to the box, broken. They'd have to slide the lid all the way off, right? None of the lids are off.
The lids are on the floor.
Right.
That's a really good point.
Right.
Somebody went through there and systematically opened every box and only opened it enough to look in, and I don't think that they found anything in there.
Yeah. I think that's a great observation because that is a great observation. Yeah, you're not getting anything big out of there with the lids where they are. Oh,
right.
And by the way, not for nothing, but the other thing I hear get thrown up about the Serapeum is like, well, Marriott found the remnants of pulleys.
Right.
What do you think the pulleys were used for?
Right. Opening the boxes.
How do you think they got the exactly? Like this is, and the Egyptologists know that there were pulleys found there. This would have been front page news for Egyptology and for ancient Egypt because they were not known to have used pulleys. There's no examples of them. They don't draw it. There's no scenes. There's no nothing of them using those types of force multipliers. But for damn sure, the Romans and the Greeks and people after that certainly did.
Sure.
And the remnants of wooden pulleys in there. We know there was later occupation. I think. Yeah, I don't think they were used in order to move the boxes around so much as this is probably the evidence of people shifting those lids.
I would say, though, my argument that there was something in those boxes is that one of them was still closed. That's the thing that tells me that there was something in all of the open boxes. It doesn't have to be something that's big enough to require to take the lid all the way off. But I think, like, my thought is that the reason one box was not opened was because they knew it was empty.
Yeah,
that's
because if you're gonna open,
that's an argument. That's an argument for them being empty, though. Like if there was stuff in the other boxes, then they wouldn't have left one closed.
Right. So
unless they had knowledge of what was in them.
Yeah. So he's making the point that
and
somebody
it's more valuable.
Yeah. Whoever opened the boxes knew already what was in the boxes and which ones had stuff in them, and they just didn't open the box that was empty. That's one possibility.
That's my thought.
Right.
Another possibility is that they were opened by much later people who didn't know what was in them. That doesn't explain why they didn't open that last box, though. That's the problem.
I mean, you're going to go through 20
of the effort.
You're going to go, yeah. They died while opening it.
Well, eventually it's like, God damn it. Like 24 of them, like, or whatever it is. Like we opened 20 of them. The last one's still shut. Like stuff this.
Yeah.
We're not spending another week trying to pry this damn lid off.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know if that box, I don't think
maybe they didn't know it was there.
What if
the alcove was sealed up?
Sealed up. That's right. Interesting too, in that back room, that back area that we got into, like there is still a sealed up alcove in there. and you could look through it. Like there was a couple holes in the brick wall, and you could see into. It was an empty alcove, but it was
Yeah.
still like
Look,
a sealed alcove.
You would only need to move the lid and open the box 2 inches or 3 inches to get a torch and to see if it's empty.
Right. So I'm
You shove
imagining.
like a little mirror in there or something. You got to open it enough to stick your head in there and look around. I mean, maybe they
Yeah,
were doing
maybe.
that. Like it's enough for a head.
Yeah, that's what I'm imagining. Is like the lid's sitting there and it's massive, however many tons, and so you set up this whole system with pulleys and ropes and pry bars and everything, and you finally get it moving once, and it slides, and that's it.
Yeah.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. You might get it to slide like 2 inches and then it stops.
It stops.
And then you got to keep going.
Well, it's like pull. They probably pulled it a bunch and a bunch and a bunch and a bunch. And I don't know. You think that, I don't know. I'm just thinking of the mechanics of doing it. If you get your whole apparatus set up there and all the people and whatever else it takes to like yank on the ropes, and you start moving the lid, you move it a little bit, then you pull again and you pull again, like that chain gang work. You got everybody there on the ropes. Keep pulling.
Yeah.
The guy's probably opening it with the expectation of, well, we're going to be able to shove someone in there to check it out or whatever. Keep pulling. And then you get to a point where it's like, all right, stop. Now we can go look.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in that system, you're going to open it more than just like a crack. You want to open that
Yeah.
a foot or 2 or 3 or whatever, and just depending on how easy it's shifting.
Right.
And it wasn't clear. I mean, because a lot of them are like, they're hanging off the edge of it. Like it's not, obviously, they're not just pulling them straight.
Pulling them
There's-
straight. Right. It just
They're
it
all
slid in
wonky
whatever
and-
direction
Yeah.
it could slide from whichever way they were able to
For
mount
sure.
things. And
Well,
some of them have the big, some of the lids have big, like square holes dug into them. And those square holes we noticed are not nice and square and are not polished. They're roughly cut out of them. So that seems like, again, later people like trying to make places to pry on the lids from. It's not, in other words,
Yeah.
those aren't part of the original box. The other thing is that box that we got through the closed door to go see,
Yeah.
its lid is also slid off. It's not,
And it's
all,
an inset lid.
Yeah, it's not all the way on there. So that's the next question: is did somebody try to open that one as well, or
That's a tough question because that thing does have lifting bosses
it
on
has lifting bosses on it?
and it's an inset lid. I don't know. In fact, I'd love to know if there are any other boxes that have an inset lid. This thing actually had a lip,
Yeah,
an inset lip, and then the lid had an inset shift. So you couldn't have slid the lid off that.
I think that's how they cracked it.
You-
You
Try
slide the lid on and it falls into that hole and cracks the side of the box.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
And they're like, don't build them like that anymore.
Yeah, maybe, right?
I mean, that's
Park
just
this one in the
again,
corner.
it's just a guess, but
And then they would take the lid off again, though. It seems that the lid
Yeah.
is like shoved on there, and it seems like it's been open. I don't understand. Yeah,
Right.
it's-
it was, I was interested in that. It's like that lid, if it's, did somebody open it or did the builders actually shove it back there and then just throw the lid on top of it without closing it? Because they didn't care,
God, everything about that box is a annoying mystery. It's just
This is the other thing.
it's unfinished state. It's in the back corner, and the lid's off it, like it's cracked. What
Yeah, the lid's open, but it's on the top of the box. So this is what I'm saying. It didn't look to me like they were moving those boxes around in those tunnels with the lids on them. They put the lids on
No.
afterward, right? So this
Well,
means,
in fact, you have evidence for that with the
Right.
unfinished box, the lid's in the hallway, and then also the lid for the big rose granite boxes near the entrance.
yeah. So this is the questions that come up with that box back there. Did they have to take the lid back off of it in order to get it, to put it back there? And if that's the case and it was broken and they weren't going to use it anyway, why did they bother lifting the lid and putting it on top of the box when they're just shoving it in the corner? They could have just set it down next to it, but they did all this
Right.
extra work to put the lid up on top of it.
Yeah,
It's weird.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and that's a big lump of stone.
Yeah.
That lid is gigantic.
Right. If they're just throwing it away, why is the lid on top of it?
And it's different
weird.
than the other.
It's
It's very
strange.
different than the other box. It has the square corners and the rounded top.
Yep.
It's definitely a different style than is normal down in there. Most of the Serapeum boxes have the beveled lids.
Beveled. Yep. They're like these prism shapes.
It's so
yeah,
strange.
it has a rough beveled shape on the lid on top, doesn't it? No, it's square. It's square. You're right. It's not. It's not beveled.
I thought it was round on the top, but it has the square corners. Is that
So
not
yeah,
right?
square and then a rounded top and the square ends.
Yeah,
yeah.
the ends are square, and
then
when
it's a
you look at the
rounded
top, it's
surface.
rounded, so it's like been artistically made.
That's a good point.
It's very different than the
Man.
other boxes. And so is the rose granite box. Like that one is very different, and it doesn't have a lid, or at least the lid is
does have
somewhere
lid.
else.
Yeah, the lid's
in
somewhere else.
But
near the entrance. It's that big piece of stone. You walk
But
in,
the-
turn left. It's right
yeah,
there.
but that wall, the walls of
This
that
is-
box
this
are
is-
freaking like 18 inches thick.
This is the
They're
top of the
it's
lid
incredibly thick.
of that other box.
Yeah, it's rounded on the top and it has square.
The
corners.
square corners. Yeah.
yeah. And the nubs on the end, right?
Very
And the
different style.
lifting boss is probably more accurate. Yeah. Well, yeah, and then you got the small box and you got the limestone box. I think the small box could be an Egyptian product, a dynastic
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
Nothing rules that out.
It's got the rounded
Is
in.
It's rounded.
Yeah, on the
rounded
end.
inside. And it's like, was it coming in, going out? Because it has that whole tunnel behind it to the alcove.
Right. Yep.
That you guys saw for the first time as well, right? We went.
Yeah,
back
we
there.
got to walk back down the tunnel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's that one box made of limestone that's literally in this tiny, like it's crammed in this alcove. It's a giant box, but it's limestone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfinished. It's rough. It definitely
Very
chiseled.
rough. Yeah.
And the lid on that one is on it. I don't even know if it's off it. I'm thinking from memory. It seems like it's been pried. I think there's like some wood under
Yeah, they
there.
pried
like
it
they
up
might
and,
have lifted it up, pried
put
it up, stuck some
slats
wood.
under it so that they could look.
Yeah.
See, that makes more sense than trying to slide the damn thing. Just pry it up, wedge it, keep prying,
Yeah.
wedge more until you can look in.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to. I mean, they must have been trying to. There's evidence of people trying to pry those.
I
damn
think
lids up.
they couldn't actually
couldn't.
pry them up. They had to slide them. It's too heavy to
Yeah,
pry.
'cause and two, you couldn't get something in there because the surfaces are so flat. That's one of the.
Yep.
And they're so well matched, so you couldn't like smash a crowbar in there and then lever it up.
Yeah, but there is evidence, like you said, of them chipping away at that seam,
Edge.
working at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could see it. Like there's damage where people were clearly trying to pry at the lid
Yep.
Yeah,
and failing.
Syrupia, man.
Yeah.
And this is like we've just scratched the surface of this damn trip. There's so many other things to talk
Right,
about. So
yeah.
many other sides. It's nuts.
Well, I will mention that this is the other thing, bent pyramid. So we went back to the bent pyramid. And Ben, isn't this a place that's been open recently, really?
I think since 2018, 2019, something like that.
So before that, it was closed for a
2019.
long time, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So we got into the bent pyramid, and there is there's once you go down the descending passage and you get into the main chamber.
You
and
go
then-
down the descending passage, you go up a stairway into the main chamber, a really steep stairway. And the main chamber
Well,
is ridiculously tall. It's like
Yeah.
huge corbelled. It's corbelled square.
Yeah.
So it's like a square room that's successively
tall.
getting smaller and smaller as it goes up.
Yeah. And then once you get to the top of that chamber, which is done by
They built a scaffold. in
massive
there.
scaffold with a
Stairways.
stairway. So you go around and around and around. You get all the way up to the top, and then there's like a robber's tunnel, like somebody cut through. I don't know
it's
what
like
it was.
a rock cut passage. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like 35, 40 feet, something like this. And it's not. Yeah, I mean it's been cut through. It feels like it's been cut through the bedrock
Yeah.
to
through
connect it up to this other whole
To
set of
connect it.
chambers.
Yeah. So this is the interesting
Is it
thing.
in the bedrock? Really? I thought that was
Well,
masonry.
not bedrock.
through the core blocks. Yeah.
The
The core
masonry.
blocks.
Okay,
not
yeah.
it's not bedrock. You're right. Yeah.
So somebody cut through. Right. Okay. So this is the thing. Once you get up to the top of that big tall chamber that Kyle was talking about, you climb the scaffold, then you go through this roughly hewn thing into another passage, and to the right,
East-west.
to the right, the passage goes for a little way, and then it connects to what there used to be a rock ceiling doorway there, and then there's an ascending passage that goes all the way out to the outside of the pyramid and opens out way up high on the side of the pyramid but it's still below the bend
Yeah.
of the bent pyramid. If you go to the left, it goes into another corbelled chamber with several false floors that have been busted through. But what's interesting is, so that's like it seems like originally those were two completely different interior sections that somebody just connected them by digging through from the one chamber,
Yeah.
from the one passage into the top of that other chamber. But originally, it seems like the pyramid builders did not intend those two things to be connected to each other.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's really strange.
Yeah.
But this tunnel that goes through the top is like snaky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's amazing how accurately it meets up with the top of that chamber and that other hallway.
Right.
it's one of those things. Yeah.
I scanned it.
I mean, who knows? There might have
Scanned all the
been like a shaft, like the shafts in the.
Oh, yeah, like a
Great
small
pyramid
shaft
that-
that
Oh, that
they
they
might have
just
dug
followed it.
along. Yeah.
They just hammered their way through it. I mean,
That's
it
a
could be
great
something
point.
like that.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing when the stories about that pyramid, about there being, when they were first clearing that thing out, that there was like a movement in the pyramid, and then all of a sudden a draft comes flowing through there. Like, because there's those two sliding doors in that east-west passageway, right? There's
Yeah.
the one that goes out to the west side, I think, with that ascending passage, and then there's the other one that's propped up on the bit of wood that you go through, and it seems sketchy as all hell. It's like, don't touch this piece of wood,
Right.
because otherwise this giant limestone slab's going to come down, and then there'll be people stuck in the pyramid,
Right.
until we get some jackhammers up in here and get you out again.
Right.
Like it's, yeah, it's but there's definitely this mechanism for a sliding door, particularly on that right-hand turn, that with the ascending passage, and there's tales of this when this pyramid is first being cleared out about that opening and shutting or something. Like there's literally, that seems to be what it correlates to, where something happens and it's now this draft that flows through the pyramid and it's making noise and there's air, and then it stops all of a sudden. And I think that whole door's been destroyed and removed now. But
yeah.
but maybe there was a shaft there. Maybe I mean, I thought about that too. It's because it's like, it's almost, it's this miraculous connection between these two what potentially seem to be unrelated chambers. But
Yeah.
if your purpose is not for people to move through there, but rather for some air or fluid or something else,
Yep.
then maybe it's just like one of those 4-inch or 6-inch shafts like we have in the Great Pyramid.
Right. And so somebody came and
you
dug
wanna-
through. Yeah.
Like, where the
That's
fuck does this
amazing.
go? And you hammer your way through there and follow it. And
Now I'm thinking
the result what you get.
that's what the well shaft is in the Great Pyramid.
They were
Yeah.
Was a shaft.
digging along a
and
small
they just,
shaft.
They just
Could have
widened
been.
it out so that they could go to where, and it actually led
Next up.
directly to the Grand Gallery.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what was there first, right?
Right.
Definitely, this stuff's been hacked out. Although, I mean, and then somebody must have finished that passage, because the top part of the well shaft from the Grand Gallery is constructed blocks.
Right. So
Yeah.
that was
It's
already
not-
there.
It's not roughly hewn. That was there.
Yeah. The constructed blocks.
You're
went
talking
in-
about the bottom part.
Yeah. The constructed blocks
That
would have
goes
gone
through the-
in and ended with a square hole.
It would have had to have been natural
grotto.
unless they had
Yeah.
some kind of drilling rig that could have drilled that hole, because it's in the bedrock.
It is in the bedrock.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, you couldn't
right.
construct it. That's
so
true.
if it was a natural, like they say, I know now we're switching over to the. You didn't even finish your story, but
Oh no,
if there
it's
was a
good.
natural, say, like a karst, like a cave type of
Sure.
thing for water, like maybe a spring that came up from the subterranean chamber area and went all the way up to the grotto
really interesting.
at the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then somebody followed that and widened it to get in, because like the pyramid builders built over this natural
Yeah.
passageway through the bedrock.
Right.
That's okay. So anyway,
No, that's
new idea
Yeah,
based on
new ideas.
widening small
Yeah.
passageways. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I got to climb up that ascending passage in the upper part of the bent pyramid, and I
Yeah,
climbed.
it's closed,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's closed off. You're not supposed to do it. But the grate that was this sort of mesh that they have covering it was sort of pushed aside, and Ben was like, "Go for it, bro." And then I was like, "Well, fuck yeah!" So I climbed through there. And the whole, I got part of the way, and I was like, I'll just have a look. And I got part of the way, and I looked up, and I'm like, well, I'll go a little further. And I went a little further, and then I started seeing bits of rope. And Ben had told me, oh, there's a rope hanging down because it gets steep. I started seeing fragments of rope, and I'm like, man, I don't even know if I can trust this rope. There's pieces of it all over the passage. But I could, and this was crazy because looking up, you're already looking up, it's very steep, and you could see at the end that it got steeper. And then it got steeper again. Looked like it just ramped way up. And I was like, well, I'll climb up there a little farther. And I got up to the bottom to where the rope ended. And yeah, it was all frayed and falling apart. And by that point, I was like, I just need to go all the way. I'm all the way up here anyway. And yeah, at the end, you needed the rope because unlike the rest of the ascending and descending passages that we climb around in the pyramids, there's no constructed walkway with slats, convenient slats that make a stair. And it was slippery and sandy. And so I'm climbing up with the rope and trying not to fall, you know, because if you slip and fall, you're going to slide all the way down to the, you know, most of the way to the bottom of the shaft, basically. But I managed to get all the way up to where the grate was and look out. And it's so weird. You know, you just wonder what the hell is the purpose of this? You're not going to be moving stuff through there. It's not a great thing for workers to carry materials in and out with. You know, you're hunched. It's way smaller than the other ascending passages. Even the Bent Pyramid, which has a notorious descending passage. This is much.
This is the Bent Pyramid you're talking about.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sorry. Even the Bent Pyramid's actual descending passage you climb down in, which is very tight.
Which is smaller than other pyramids.
Yeah, this was way smaller than that. It was much narrower, right? And also way shorter. In other words, it was a very small passage, and climbing up that was tough because you're hunched way over and you're kind of crouch walking.
Yeah.
So it just didn't seem like, and then it just ends way up on the side of the pyramid. You know, it's just such a strange feature. Now there's a series of metal grates up there, so I couldn't poke my head out and look around, which would have been fantastic. But the other thing I noticed, which was, and this is something that has been, you know, we've seen in other places in other pyramids, is that as you got closer to the exit, the stonework got finer. And I took some video and pictures from like all the way out at the exit. I turned around and looked back in, and the stonework is just beautiful going down. But down at the bottom where I started from the deep inside the pyramid, it was very rough.
Yeah. I remember this too from other descending passageways.
Madum.
Is that where it is? You go in and it's just like beautiful. I mean, even the middle pyramid is kind of like this, right? You go in and it's just like beautiful construction right when you go in, and then after you go down a certain ways, it gets a little more rough and yeah.
My Doom's bang on like that too. It's beautiful stonework at the top of that passage, and then it sort of gets progressively rougher as you go down.
Yeah.
To where it just seems like it's been hacked out of the limestone at the bottom.
Right. It just makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Again, now I'm thinking about small shafts that have been hacked through later.
Yeah, I don't know.
What if all of it was like that?
It's constructed like that. Like that does seem like it's an exit, like, or had some purpose. I mean, that's the nice thing about them. I mean, it's a torturous, bloody pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, but to go into it, it's one of the harder pyramids to go through physically. But it's quite nice when you get up into that east-west passageway because there is literally a breeze. There's like airflow that goes through there.
Yeah.
That's another.
It kind of reminded me of a pressure relief. You know, you can imagine the side of the pyramid is just like, right? Comes out of that thing way up high.
Yeah.
It is doing that. I was noticing that like I was, you know, among the last few people that left that pyramid. And just standing in that, when you go to the juncture between the little, what we're calling sort of the robber tunnel or whatever you want to call it, between the main chamber and that upper whole section, there's just this beautiful breeze coming through there.
Yeah.
And that's just natural, convection causing that to happen? What is that?
Well, that's the source of all the rumors, like the use of the stories you can hear about and read about when they were first clearing it. Like it's like that switched on and off and then back on again.
Wow.
It's a very strange story. Like as if that door was opening and closing. Yeah, something. Yeah. And then it makes a noise when the wind picks up like it.
Or a prevailing wind or something. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
It's really interesting how it's just a constant flow. To me, it seemed like a constant flow through there.
Well, it is now. I mean, if there was a door there, I mean, the whole mechanism is destroyed now. Like it's gone.
Yeah.
Like you can see where it was recessed and it would come in and out. It definitely seems like a mechanism, but
yeah.
Yeah, that one's a mystery. The bent pyramid's enigmatic. It's one of the stranger pyramids, man.
It is weird.
It's like you have that corbelled main chamber, and then you've got this weird recessed corbelled chamber off the side of it as well. Like there's another corbelled chamber that they've sealed up.
Yep.
Almost like they were practicing something. I don't know. I don't know what to make of the bent pyramid.
And the only one where the casing blocks are like tilted in towards the structure.
Yep. Which is why it's still.
Most of them are still there.
Yeah. To me, I'm like, maybe they figured out, like, I don't know. It's like, why did they make it this way? Was it, I don't know. It's like every other casing off of every other pyramid was completely robbed.
I want to know if the casing stones above the bend are tilted inwards. I bet they're not. I think the casing stones below the bend are tilted inwards to support that upper. It helps support that upper section, maybe.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I don't know. Shit wasn't
either.
a mistake, I don't think, though.
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like a mistake.
Orthodox explanation is like, well, he was practicing building pyramids because this was allegedly the third pyramid ever built, right? The bent pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah, step pyramid, Madum, bent pyramid, red pyramid.
It seems like you could practice with something smaller.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Is like that's the stupidity of calling it a mistake.
Yeah.
It's like, why did you finish it?
Yeah. Right.
Like, why did you finish it? Like, if it's a mistake and you got to the join and you're like, oh shit, this thing's going to be way too steep. We need to change the angle.
And
well, you know what?
Yeah, they don't figure it out.
We're going to build another end anyway. Like, well, damn it, Johnson, we're finishing this shit anyway because that's the contract. I don't know.
Like, no one ever drew it out and figured out that it's going to be really tall.
Yeah.
So
stupid. Yeah. And you can also, that's another area we noticed that at Dashur too, right? It's like, it's sand dunes, there's sand everywhere. There's quite clearly a lot of foundation and floor work that had to happen before you could plop a pyramid out there in the desert.
Yeah.
There was a lot of work that went into preparing the site beforehand as well. It's not
yes, that's right.
They just built it on sand dunes or something.
And there's the interesting, Yusuf was pointing out that, there's this weird like conglomerate that's kind of poured around some areas. It looks like it was poured in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they were using a very rough kind of concrete almost. Now, we don't know. We don't know, but it's.
I really
it's like
wanted
flint.
Chuck
There's
to
all
look
this.
at this.
There's all this river rock and flint, and it's embedded in a strata, like in a in some sort of, what would you call it? Like a.
It's embedded in a matrix that's holding
a matrix. Yeah. And we saw it at Saqqara in particular around the Winis pyramid, and it's like almost as if, and there's actually there's a channel cut next to it, which is cool because then you can see like the strata lines and you can see how deep it is, and it's not like this is natural material for this area,
right?
And it hasn't been brought in modern times, and it's the foundation of the pyramid, and in some of the shafts around that pyramid, you can also see it in the top level. It's almost as if they use this material to level out the site.
Right.
Yeah, on basically one side, because I walked to the other side and it's definitely not there, and the bedrock's exposed on the other side.
Right. And Yusuf was showing us how like the limestone that it's sitting on top of would have these deep cracks, and the stuff had poured in and filled those cracks up. Which could happen naturally, but it was just very interesting to look at it, how it's clearly come in after the fact.
Yeah, that was the tricky thing about it, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted Chuck to look at it. We didn't get the opportunity, but the big channel that you're talking about that you can walk down in, it's like you think of a
Saqqara.
Yeah, you think of a flood or something cut this big channel, and the channel's running one direction, and you're looking at the wall of that channel or that ravine or whatever, and you see the conglomerate stuff up there, and it's filling cracks of erosion in the bedrock that are running perpendicular
yes, that's right, perpendicular to the channel.
So it's like if the channel was natural, if this ravine was natural, then naturally you would have perpendicular, smaller channels from water running into this bigger channel, right?
Yeah.
Mm. So that erosion coming from the sides is there, going into the bigger channel and then washing it down. If that conglomerate stuff was laid down in a flood, it would have been a big flood, which means it would have been running the direction of the big channel.
Yeah, that's right.
Not the small little channels
ones
feeding into the big one.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it would have, like what I thought is, it should have leveled those little ones out.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's not. It's actually filling them very precisely,
Yeah.
preserving them. So
Yep.
it doesn't look like it was laid down in a big flood.
Right.
It looks like it was poured.
Yeah.
And there's another sort of factoid to fry your noodle out there is that this also seems to be the material that we saw inside the grotto
That's
That's right.
at in the Great Pyramid,
Right.
Right.
which is the cabin that's just below ground level essentially. And it's, the video and footage I've seen from there, it's just like that seems to be that same type of material.
Right. It looks the same,
Like
and it's
flint
right at ground
nodule.
level.
Yeah. Flint nodules in some kind of fine
Matrix.
matrix
Yeah.
material that is concreting those flint nodules, and quartz, smoothed, rounded, like river
Rock style.
rock,
Yeah. Gravel.
polished.
Yeah.
gravel.
And cobbles.
So yeah, if you had a deposit, like a sedimentary deposit of all these flint nodules that were river, washed and smoothed and rounded, and then you collected all that stuff and you washed that stone, and you had all these basic, just like we do today. You mine, you dig, you mine it all, you wash it, you sift it, you get all the roughly the same size stones. You're not crushing it, so they're all polished by whatever ancient river they were in. Then you mix it with some type of concrete material and you pour it. That's
Right.
what it looks like.
That's what it looks like.
And last year when we crawled down into the Mastaba 17, I noticed this stuff when I was crawling through that tunnel going down into Mastaba 17. I was looking at the walls. I was crawling on my knees. I was like hitting these really hard, like what? And I grab them, looking at them, and I'm like, this is like polished flint nodules, like nice round,
River worn flint or whatever.
river worn flint nodules, and the walls were completely made of it. But and I'm touching the walls, and it's like this is like concrete. It's hard.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like, did they actually pour that all over the top of whatever the construction underneath Mastaba 17?
Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So this trip really, I was looking at that stuff everywhere. And then when we were at the Red Pyramid, those flint nodules are strewn all over
everywhere.
the ground
Yeah.
around the Red Pyramid.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking like, okay, this is foundation concrete
Yeah.
for whatever construction they were doing. So it'd be really cool to, if that's true, you could maybe look for that type of deposited material in other places in Egypt and say, hey, this is a foundation
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
or a roof. In the case
right.
of Mastaba 17, it's
Yeah.
like they poured it over the entire thing and very deep.
Yeah.
That would have been a
Yeah,
big
I mean, it is
pour.
deep. Yeah, that was a big ass hole they dug for that whole structure at Mastaba 17. When Petrie found it, he had to dig quite a lot to eventually find the roof of that thing. He cut that sucker in half trying to look for it. So,
Well,
yeah, man.
gentlemen, should we call it? Been a great show.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Keep
This is
talking.
great.
We can do more.
We have many more to come. We'll
Many
more.
we
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
We'll get Chuck on. And we'll the small brain geologist who did the okay, before we go, because we skipped past this, that Chuck did the taste test on the goo. Like, did you say that? That's
He did. Yeah.
We talked about that
okay.
up front. Yeah. Mr.
Well,
Solved on the good.
you mentioned it, but
He did legit do a taste test.
Okay,
And I did throw up a little bit in my mouth when he said it. And
Chuck, dude.
so he just swiped some on his finger and licked it, right? That's like
he doesn't give did not give a fuck. I'm like,
Okay.
all right, man.
good
Give
deal.
him a couple days, see what happens.
Yeah. All right, guys.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Fantastic trip. More shows to come. Thank you all for
Giant middle finger for all of you in the back of the bus.
Yeah.
yeah. Middle finger to the back.
Everybody
of the bus,
else that came with us on the Egypt trip, I love you.
people. Yeah. We always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
Right. So we ended the recording with Ben there, but there was a couple extra things that we wanted to say at the end here. Number one, make sure to check him out, unchartedx.com and the Uncharted X channel on YouTube. He also has Uncharted X Live and some other stuff. Ben's got a lot of great work. If you're not familiar with it, you should be. Definitely go watch everything he's got. He also has a podcast, so you can check that out. And he does weekly streams, almost weekly. He's got a lot of content. It's really good. He's a fantastic researcher.
He streams his video game playing too.
He does. I actually was in the video game stream last night. We were playing old Warhammer together.
Okay.
And, yeah. Yep.
I plan to stream my checkers game.
You should stream.
Really good.
You should stream you working in Logic. People would love that. Dude,
Okay, I
just
could
to watch you making music.
I could do that.
Yeah, that would be great.
I don't know if I could work on vocals in front of people.
Well, you don't have to do that, but you can show.
I was like running around hiding and stuff.
Right. So, yes. So, this is the other thing. At the end here, we're putting in a song that Kyle made at the end of the tour. So, it's like the tour ended, but Ben and Kyle and I had another 5 or 6 days, and we were sitting in a hotel in Cairo near, like right next to the plateau, just a street over from Yusuf's shop. And there was a cafe on the top floor. Like you could go up on
Upper
the
deck,
upper deck,
open,
and just look
like-
out, and the 3 pyramids right there was absolutely amazing. And Kyle brought the guitar up, started playing, and then he just got in the zone and got totally focused. And for the next 2 days, we barely saw him because he's just writing. And he found out that he had a full studio on his phone, right? And he was like, dude.
Yeah, it's like, well, I've had GarageBand on this phone, but I've never used it. And I just started using it. I came up with this little guitar riff and I recorded it on GarageBand with my headphone. Like I brought some wired headphones because with the Bluetooth, there's a latency issue. Like there's a delay. So I had the wired headphones. I plugged them in and it's got the little mic that's like dangling over by your right cheek, you know? And I just kind of like was real careful not to move. And I played the guitar and I was like, damn, sounds pretty good through the little headphone microphone. And then I just started messing with the synths on there and just like I just zoned out. I started playing like it has like you bring up the piano and the piano keys show up on the phone and you can just push the notes with your fingers. And
I saw you doing that, playing the piano
so I'm like
on
playing
your phone
the piano
screen.
on the phone. I'm like playing the violins on the phone. I was like, learning this app. It was great. I was just like, I can't believe I'm walking around with this thing in my freaking pocket all the time. This is amazing.
Yeah.
After doing all the scans and everything, and that was blowing my mind that I'm like carrying this thing around and I can scan this stuff. And it's just like, so anyway, I had a moment of inspiration and it lasted many days. And I wrote this song.
So we're going to play it for you here at the end.
It's a draft, not done.
That is fantastic.
Still got to get
the first time I got to listen to it, he handed me the headphones while we were in Sharm el Sheikh, walking around in that Vegas area, and I walked around there playing the song in my head, and I was just like, "This is fucking awesome."
Thanks,
so
bro.
I really think you guys are gonna like it, and you can hear the inspiration of Egypt in it. So yeah, enjoy that for sure.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Read my mind, see my soul. I'll take a piece of you with me when I go. Oh, and you know I cannot say soul. I pray for peace to be with you in your home. Oh, and this world we cannot blame for all the suffering we bear. May it someday wane.